Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you find this, whenever you find this. I'm Sean from How to RPG. Saturdays I get up to talk about a variety of different tabletop RPG topics, whatever comes to mind. Usually interact with quite a bit of the chat. Helps me along. Thanks in advance, chat. What's up, Joe? Morning. Morning, Michigan. Good to see you, man. Hope everything's going well for you and the fam. I'm wearing the cans in case I have to turn something on. Actually, I can take these damn things off. What is new with the Joe, man? Hung out on Discord last night. It was accompanied by Farty, McButterpants, Harrigan, Laramie, Matt. Let's see, AWOL stopped by, and Herman, Ghost GM, aka Ghost GM, and am I missing anybody? God, I bet you I'm missing somebody. It was fun. We're all over the place when we were talking. A couple things that Laramie brought up were interesting. I think that was it. I think that was all. If I'm missing one person, I'm terribly sorry. Had a session with a new DM. Started a bit rough. Ooh. So I'm guessing D&D 5th edition. Is it a new campaign? Is it a published game? And when you say new DM, is it a friend of yours who's new to DMing? Or is it just hey, I was running for a while. Another person stepped up. They've DM'd before, but they're new to the present time running a game. So new DM to me can be a number of different things. I'm interested. And how's the Tomb of Annihilation game going, man? I'm interested to find out if that's still going and how well. For those that are tuning into this, Joe is a friend of ours, friend of mine, in Michigan. And we've communicated frequently on and off over time, right, Joe? So he's come to Wisconsin and gamed with Brett and I a couple times, and Wayne Lumrunner Humfleet and Kevin Lovecraft and Eric Farmer, a few others. So he's kind of, good times. I'm kind of cool. I have the heat on down here in my basement, but it takes a while for it to kind of get really warm. So I thought I turned it on early enough to make that coolness go away. It's a friend's cousin. The DM was new to me. Gotcha. He was just trying to have us create everything and didn't give me anything to work with. Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So Twitter, I went on Twitter and of course didn't get really any answers and framed up the poll in a shitty way, considering. It's funny, you put a poll. I realized that there are some people that put up a poll, right? Like, hey, I'm curious, ask question, 3 options, people click an option, you find out kind of what the trend is for that particular question. And I put out, hey, 5e players, and only 5e players exclusively. Like, you don't play anything else. In RPGs, you got into RPGs through 5th edition, when 5.5, 6 is coming out. What are you doing? Are you sticking with 5th? Are you going to 5.5, 6th? Or are you going to try other RPGs? And of course, somebody's like, why not all 3? Which was an oversight on my part, of course. But I bring that up because it fell apart. But I am still interested, and it's hard to gauge. People won't answer those polls or whatever. Anyways, I'm still interested in to find out how that goes, because I think last week I mentioned how we're at a pretty interesting crossroads because of the announcement of Wizards of the Coast coming out with a different iteration of the core rules, whatever that is, or a tweak, whatever. So we'll see. But I'm hopeful, right? It's kind of like we talk about the Golden Age. Some of these folks having to make that decision is going to be an interesting one. So I think now, if I were every other publisher on the planet, I would be pushing my wares pretty heavily and hard, and probably come up with some kind of plan of attack to sway 5th edition players, devotees, if you will, to a different game. And I think people have dangled carrots in front of a lot of D&D 5e players, but probably haven't had any really stick because, and some probably have moved, but now I think it's a big opportunity. So how do you do that? You could probably go on some podcasts. You could stream some actual plays. You could run events of your game at different cons, or get an ambassador program of some kind. One thing that I find interesting, I don't know if it's just, I don't know any decent size or well known publisher people. Like I do, but I don't, right? Like, I've met people from Wizards of the Coast, but you have lunch and then that's kind of it. There's no real longer term relationship that I have with folks, like even with Green Ronin or something smaller. And I only bring this up. Hey, what's up, William? Morning. I only bring this up because I wish I had more insight into some of the things that they encounter as obstacles for a company perspective. And my guess is a lot of people aren't doing it full time. Therefore, they don't have a lot of time to do a lot of the stuff to really move their needle in the RPG hobby as much as they probably would like. That's just sheer speculation on my part, and that's not a dig on them. It's just like I could sit here and go, oh, they should probably do this and do that, and they would bubble up to the top or find more customers and they would grow and blah, 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 blah. And, typical armchair quarterback, right? Like, you don't know what the hell you're talking about, man. It's easy to sit down in your basement on a microphone, you come up with all these stupid ideas, but we can't execute on them. So, yeah. What's up, Phil? Morning. Going back to Joe, Tomb is slow going but fun. Almost got a TPK due to 2 players being gone. 5 Terrafolk tore up our level 3 trio with a couple NPCs. Nice. The new game he's playing is 5th edition. So yeah, what I was going to say about the other publishers and trying to get things like consistently going. One thing I find interesting is you've got Goodman Games does a really good job about with this. They have the road crew, and when pre-pandemic, the olden days, we used to go to cons and we could travel amongst ourselves, and the biggest worry we had to think about was, as far as illness goes, it'd be like catching the flu or con crud or something like that. But the road crew from Goodman Games is really interesting because they kind of get a bunch of stuff from Goodman Games, like stickers and bookmarks and like this big care package of a bunch of stuff that they can literally take with them when they go and run games. Specifically Dungeon Crawl Classics, because it's kind of Goodman's flagship game, and hand them out at cons. And Brendan LaSalle is a big I think he's like the full-time guy for Goodman Games who does that. He runs games, he streams games, he attends virtual cons and face-to-face in-person conventions. And I think the road crew has, I don't know if they've shrunk or not, but obviously the opportunities for them to be as effective as they were pre-pandemic is just probably diminished quite a bit. But nonetheless, they are doing that. They have done it, and they know how to do it. D&D's Wizards of the Coast, they have Adventurers League. They have a lot of fans, so the program kind of is that piece. And I say this because it's our first year for BSerCon, and we're not going out and finding industry personalities or guests of honor, or having a big row of artists at Artists Alley. You can go down and look at all the artists and their work and all this stuff. It's not that convention, and I don't know if it'll ever be that type of convention, but there's plenty of virtual conventions, and I don't know if they're effective for publishers. So I guess the short of it is I think there's a lot of publishers that are like very passionate about role-playing games. Obviously, they're good designers and good developers. They have a kind of a business. They have a business. They put the product together, release it, people buy it, things are good. Maybe it gets some money, lines their coffers, and like Brett says, maybe it gets him enough money to buy new bow once a year or whatever thing that is, right? Something relatively kind of like, some would say it's like beer money, right? And with these ambassador programs, especially with role-playing games, you can get some really passionate, enthusiastic, dare I say fanatic, loyalists of particular games or particular companies. So, an example would be Monte Cook Games, and people really loving Cypher System and Numenera. And Troy and Darcy were on Gaming and BS podcast. They had Cypher Talk, the podcast. I mean, a podcast solely dedicated to the Cypher System. And, there's podcasts that are solely dedicated to DCC and rinse and repeat and continue on. And, I don't know how, I know, of course, I don't know how publishing houses are leaning or taking advantage of those individuals. Because I think that I don't know if it's an untapped market necessarily, but I think it's like sometimes from my perspective in my seat, is that, hey, I'm going to put out a product. It's great. People either know us or they don't know us. And if we put out a good product, they'll talk about us and then the other people will buy it. Or we have a 5,000, 10,000 print run and they buy it. And once it's gone, we'll maybe reconsider printing it. Or maybe the next runs are smaller. We sell it and kind of rinse, repeat, where the marketing is, they don't have the resources to put into marketing. Buying billboards, TV ads, that's the crazy side of things. But, what other things are they doing? Pay-per-click on the web, ads on Twitter, and maybe the ROI doesn't pay off. Like, okay, so there's an ad, but that's not how people get pulled into role-playing games. Therefore, they don't find it as a value. So many things, so many questions. So many moving parts. Craig Shipman. I should tap Craig. Craig, you need to, when you talk to these developers and designers, what does that look like? Because I think he comes from I'm going to interview Sean, or let's say Brett, right? My buddy Brett, co-host the Gaming and BS, and says, I'm going to talk to Brett about Streets of Avalon. Boom, great. And Brett worked with Encoded Designs, so Brett's his involvement in the project. I don't think I'm saying anything out of line with Brett and his Streets of Avalon project. And I say project as in before that book came out, like that time, like the idea that Brett had, and he's run it, and he wants to make it into an actual product, all the way up to the product from there to there. And so Brett's probably like, yep, I'm an advisor. I write a lot of the stuff and put it down to paper, and then Encoded Dude did all kind of the other stuff. But so Craig has interviewed individuals like Dennis Detweiler from Delta Green, and even Shane Hensley for Pinnacle, perfect example. So I would be more interested in some of the things that are rolling around in my brain, because you could ask Shane, like, well, where did the concept of Savage Worlds come from? Where what is Deadlands, or how did it go from Deadlands to Savage Worlds? And some of those things, and those are very interesting. I like how Craig interviews, but I'm also interested to understand, like, what are some of the challenges facing a person like Shane, who's running a pretty reputable game, like putting out Savage Worlds. Savage Worlds is a pretty well-known entity, I think, in the role-playing games ecosphere. And what are some of the more inner workings of a publishing company, other than, well, we sit down, we come up with an idea, we have rules, and then we have settings, and we have companions, and we have these other things that we're producing. Like, okay, great. Like, that's you and a lot of other game companies. Help me understand the nuances of not only coming up with a book, but what the challenges are of marketing the book, shipping the book. Shipping, maybe not so much. Logistics, that's kind of, I think we can all assume, like, you outsource it to some printers. They come up with some proofs. You're like, great, this is good. That's bad. Fix this. Redo that. Send another copy. Okay, that's great. That's the one we want to use. Have it printed. Put it in boxes, crates, shipped. Blah blah blah. Right. Anyways, Phil says a lot of online criticism of recent 5e campaigns have been they're less cohesive because they're relying more on freelance writers. Not sure how true that is. Yeah. Well, and so I mentioned that last night. So last night I was online hanging out and accompanied by some friends on the Gaming NPS Discord. And I was bringing up Matt Colville's video, aside from the 5.56 thing, and we were talking about Sly Flourish again. Mike Shea comes up, and Mike, you're welcome. And Mike is, if you don't follow him, so Mike is the guy who wrote The Lazy Dungeon Master. And then he wrote a follow-up called The Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. And I own it. And it's Mike's been a big D&D guy for a long time. And the Lazy Dungeon Master is a method he's devised for prep. And I've used it, and it's good. I like it. Does it fit everybody? No. And he streams on Sundays on Twitch, and he has a YouTube channel. If you haven't checked him out, by all means. And he's worked, not only that, but in the Lazy Dungeon Master, he's worked with a lot of other individuals, like James Introcaso from Arcadia, which is MCDM, at Colville's publishing venture. He's worked with a few others. He's got products probably in DM's Guild, I'm guessing, and whatever. But since I've known Mike, it's always been, he'll go on his stream, he'll talk, he has Patreon, and he'll field inquiries from his Patreon on his stream, and he'll talk about kind of this, like he'll just talk. He's probably got a little bit more refined outline, and like one time he was talking about getting published in the RPG industry, like things to do or whatever. And then after that first hour or first 30 to 60 minutes, then he cuts that off, uses that as an episode for his YouTube channel. And then he goes into game prep. And Mike has, he's run many of the published 5e campaigns, Tyranny of Dragons, Horde of the Dragon Queen, all the way up through Rime of the Frost Maiden. And he, I like this one. I'm not a big fan of that one. Here's some flaws with this and some tweaks. But every week, if he's running one of those campaigns, he would go into the details of what he's coming up with using his kind of method, right? His lazy dungeon master method of prep. And recently, Mike has ventured into Blades in the Dark. So when I tune into him and watch, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to try this, try to Blades in the Dark. And he's, so when he mentioned that, I guess it was surprising to me because I said, I've only played Scum and Villainy and Blades in the Dark once each. And there are things that you hear and then you play and then go, oh, okay, some of this is clicking, but Blades in the Dark or Forge in the Dark games, people will kind of say its strengths are playing it over time because you have these heists that you do or jobs or whatever it's called in whatever offshoot or Forged in the Dark game. And then you have these downtime spaces. So you do the heist. Okay, the heist is done. Great. Now let's do all these other things. And if you do a one shot, some of those other things don't really matter. You kind of go through the motions, but they don't. They're kind of hung out there because you're not applying them to the next job, right? And it is a different game, right, than 5th edition, right? That's another one. And it's a different way to, you don't like prepping for 5th edition, even if you're running a published Rime of the Frost Maiden game and Mike's Lazy Dungeon Master approach, and you go to Blades, it is crazy different. And so it's interesting first of all, I applaud him for doing that because I'm like, yes, I always am interested to find out, especially guys like Mike, because they're so rooted in that D&D ecosystem. And then they venture out. And I know Mike's probably played other games than D&D, but this is one of the first ones I've come across since I've known him, right? That is exploring Blades in the Dark. And, he's like, I don't know if it's his jam. He's making it work. His players so far seem to enjoy it. He's not very far down the road. Maybe they haven't had a couple sessions. And I think one time during the stream, he even said, hey, hey, Blades in the Dark people, am I doing too much prep, right? And maybe I'm doing too much and taking it from the approach that I usually do, and maybe I don't need to. And so he was looking for some feedback in that regard. And then we were so that kind of came up in conversation last night because some of us had watched Mike and were watching the same stream. I think Farty did, and a couple others. So and then Matt Colville, I've got a video up. I don't know if I'll play the whole thing. I might put a link down below. I will put a link down below. But he talks about game rewards and he toward better rewards running the game. And literally a minute in, Matt is talking about the reward systems and how those reward systems will impact play, right? So it's, he's like, what is it? Valorian, whatever the video game is. And Matt's got a video game background. Hey, if you want people to explore the woods, you put rewards out in the woods, right? In the forest. And he goes into older school games. If the model was collect gold pieces, get experience, level up, right? So if you want to level up, it's kind of part of the game. The mechanic back then was go and get gold or kill monsters. Or just kill monster or just get gold because it's less risky and it goes further, 1 XP per gold. And he is what does he say? He's a 4th edition apologist. But he enjoyed creating encounters in 4th edition. He's played 5th edition, but when you compare, he's comparing those, the old school, collect gold, get XP, 4th edition to 5th edition, the differences between those games and the reward incentives for those games and how that impacts play. He would say, I like the old school style. And, he would say, I think he brings up an example like, what's the story? What's the hook? What's the story hook? And he would run games where there isn't one. You would just go out into the woods to explore because that's what you did because you were trying to find gold. So there was this weird conundrum that occurred between him and his players. And it's actually an interesting video. It kind of goes from here's rewards and what it facilitates in play to we're on 2 different pages. And that's why my players are probably frustrated because I'm over here, they're over there. Having said that, tying these things together, could be purely coincidental. And Matt wasn't bashing or looking at, I don't think he through the whole video was like, I'm trying to play a different game and I'm kind of done with 5th edition. That's not the case. But I do think that there's with the announcement of 5.5 and 6, we come to that crossroads. And with Mike being a big D&D 5e guy and he's trying other games, are we at a point with D&D 5th edition specifically? And I know you guys, some of you are very big 5th edition players. I think many of us have either played it, GM'd it, dabbled in it once. Not everybody, but is there a shelf life, so to speak, of 5th edition or any game, could be any game. 5th edition is just the big 500-pound gorilla, but is there a shelf life where you're like, how much 5th edition or any game is somebody able or willing to play before they may just get bored of it and try something else? I don't think there's an answer to that, but I guess there is. Do we think that there is a shelf life? And that could be anything. That could be, obviously very personal. It could be, I tried it and it could be very quick. I tried it, didn't like it, done. Somebody said that there's this other thing that might be enjoyable. I'll try that. Oh, I love it. That's my go-to. I mean, that's how some of us come across some of our favorite games that aren't D&D 5th edition. And that could be somebody influencing us to maybe check into a different game. Maybe it's a YouTube video we watched and went, oh, that sounds so much more up my alley, or looks cool, or looks beautiful. What an awesome book. I'm going to pick that up. I'm going to read it. Okay. I really jam on it. I'm going to run it. Okay. Now it's a great game and I can appreciate it for what it's worth. So it'll be interesting. Somebody noted last night, it might have been Harrigan, who was like, Pathfinder 2nd edition seems to be picking up steam. And I think when we talk about seems to be and things of that nature, it's all perception. That's people talking about playing that game in social online circles. Actual plays may pick up. Might be discussions on Twitter that are kind of moving into that direction. So it is a lot of kind of moving parts that I'm just kind of observing from arm's length, right? In seeing if that's a thing. And some of it might be personal experience, right? Like some of you may look at it and say, yep, that's kind of what I did. I got kind of burned out on it. I still like it. I'll play it and enjoy it. but there's other games that I find more, as interesting as 5th edition. There you go. I don't have anything else more to say about that. So we go back to the you go back to the chat. Oh, some faces showing up. Oh, good morning, CJ, good to see you. Phil, a lot of online criticism of recent 5th edition campaigns have been that they're less cohesive because they're relying more on freelance writers. Not sure how true that is. I just read that for the second time, and that's a good point. I wanted to go back to it because that's also another component is, if we look back at the end of 4th edition, which it's probably the one where I was the most conscious, but the least tuned in. Like 2nd edition, I was conscious. I played it a couple times. It was a long time ago, and then I think I started fading out of the hobby back then. But what Phil said, like 3rd edition, 3.5, right? They came out, I think one of the later books was like, the weapons book, right? And they started incorporating some of the 4th edition rule concepts into that game, or into that book, that supplement. And so Wizards, on making that announcement, it drastically changes the ecosphere because that fifth edition is not coming to an end. But I would say it's coming to an end of a particular type of life cycle, right? It's after a certain date, Wizards of the Coast is probably going to stop publishing 5th edition stuff. Although they say it's going to be backwards compatible. But they also say 5th edition's backwards compatible with almost every previous edition of D&D. Some would say, oh yeah, it is, totally, for sure. And some would say, no, it's not. So there's that argument. Not here to get into that particular debate. So when you make that announcement, and then you still have some books in the queue, I don't have Strixhaven, or what's the one before Strixhaven, I'm not sure. Chat's going to put it in there. I'm going to be like 5 minutes behind. But do you continue to buy those releases, and do the releases change? So going to Phil's point, they're relying more on freelancers, blah, blah, blah. Now, I would say, sure, but I think Wizards, this go around with 5th edition specifically, have leaned on third parties probably more so than they ever have in their past, including TSR. Like the Hoard of the Dragon Queen and Tyranny of Dragons, I think both of those they were done by Wizards, but I think Cobalt Press and Wolfgang Bauer were really the people behind those products. I'd have to look at everyone that came out, I'm sure. Curse of Strahd is probably heavily Wizards, maybe Tomb of Annihilation to some degree, but there's always been a huge component, I think more so, again, with 5th edition products tapping outside the company. I mean, we know some of the personalities behind some of the products, right? So there's Jeremy Crawford, Mike Merles, can't believe I'm remembering names. Chris Lindsay, there's other individuals that their names escape me, but you will find quite a few more. And to Phil's point too, like Strixhaven and the Witchlight, is it the Witchlight? I mean, huge freelancers. Like, hey, they're listing credits. There's 7 people that aren't Chris Perkins in the book and published. And so what he's saying is that because they're leaning on those freelancers, I'm going to assume, Phil, that some people would think that either the quality's not there, or they bought it and they say, well, the quality's not there and it's because they're using freelancers. I don't know. I don't have either product. I don't have any ambition to buy any more 5th edition books. Like I got rid of pretty much all of them except for Tomb of Annihilation, Curse of Strahd, Rime of the Frost Maiden, and the Core 3. And then any limited edition covers, just because they're ridiculously priced. But you come to that crossroads and you're like, okay, so do I keep continuing to buy stuff knowing that this is going to go bye-bye? Those source books like Strixhaven and those that are more recent, you can use. Like, they're not going to go anywhere. If you find value out of them and you want to run some of the things out of there or use some of the character options or archetypes and certain other details that come with those, which is many times focused towards player options, fantastic. And then we got into a little bit about D&D Beyond and, what they're going to be facing. That'll be an interesting thing. So yeah, I guess I don't know. It's just an interesting time. I brought it up last week. I brought it up again this week. It'll probably keep continuing until 5.5 comes out, 6th edition, and how that impacts the hobby. Could it be another 4th edition snafu? Every edition that's ever come out has been bigger than the previous one, which is great, fantastic. But again, people are looking at Pathfinder 2nd edition too. I haven't been keeping up with that ecosystem as much. And how their releases are and what those look like. Paizo has always been a pretty good company for adventure paths and some of those things. And Pathfinder 1st edition certainly has its spread of add-ons, supplements, that I stopped buying even in Pathfinder's heyday. Like, I just can't keep up with the amount of stuff you guys are putting out. And frankly, it just was so many options that it didn't appeal to me. Like, I think I could go, Advanced Player's Guide was great. And then past that, I don't know if I wanted anything else. Maybe the thing with RPGs I find appealing personally, even with Star Wars, right, is a perfect example. There's a freaking butt ton of Star Wars Fantasy Flight Games books. A lot, and they're not cheap because there's the Lucasfilm tax. And, what may be a $50 D&D book is a $60 Star Wars book. And some of the Star Wars books are fairly thin. I don't want to put value on the thickness of a book necessarily, because I think there are some very thin books that are ultra valuable. And just because you got this big honking tome does, to me, it's just the size, right? Size matter? I don't know. In RPG books, RPG books. But having said that, with Star Wars Fantasy Flight Games, like, okay, core rule books, great. Oh, a gadget book, that appeals to me. Starships, that appeals to me. What else? Those, and then of course there might be some era books, right? Because that universe kind of, some of the lore that takes place during certain eras, like during the Clone Wars or, before the Clone Wars, like if they did an Old Republic, man, that thing would fly off the shelves. So, but I don't need, the Guide to Scoundrels and all the different scoundrel options, and mostly because I'm a big game master. So if you take some of those things and you apply it to like the D&D space, what are some of those tomes that I personally find interesting? And some of them are adventures if I'm going to run them. And it may be, Tomb of Annihilation. Oh, it ties into Tomb of Horrors, or it's a really good, there's a hex crawl component and a dungeon crawl, dungeon delve component to it. there's a little nostalgia piece to it. Great. I like that one. Oh, and by the way, everybody that's run it before ranks it up in the top 2 to 4, published adventures by Wizards of the Coast, and how it's organized and how it plays and how it scales and and all the story. It's great. The first, Curse Strat, same thing. The other ones, I don't know. Brett's a big fan of Icewind Dale and that part of Forgotten Realms, so he's all about Rime of the Frost Maiden and playing that because that's his jam. And so I guess the thing is, I kind of got off on a weird side tangent, but it was, besides adventures and vignettes, like I think with, is it Strixhaven? Candlelight? Anyways, one of them has some very shorter plot hook stories where they're not this grandiose, long campaign that you can play in maybe a couple sessions or use as ideas and plot points. I don't know enough to speak intelligently about them and in depth, but those things may be a different angle that game masters would find or dungeon masters would find appealing. Like, oh, this is a book, because I think this is a book I could go buy and I would find value out of it and apply it and run it for my group. Or I'm a player, these gives me more options. So in short, what I'm trying to say is at this juncture of 5th edition and Dungeons and Dragons, and you take the entire lineup, what becomes valuable over time? So in the beginning, it might be like, oh, I got the core books. It's a no-brainer, right? Monster Manual's a big one. Beasties. After that, it might be an adventure. Great. But then it might turn into, one adventure and then another adventure, and 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 another adventure. Well, maybe it's different locations, different plot points within this big campaign. But maybe that runs its course, just like the Star Wars class books, where, hey, one of the things with 3.5 I found valuable was like the spell book. Like every spell you could ever imagine that was ever put out in anything, like the spell compendium, that's what it was called. And it was like, ooh, that's something I could use. Like it's comprehensive, all spells, all day, every day. And that was different from, I think, the Arcane Magic one, because the Arcane Magic one came up with different spell systems. Like, oh, you want to use mana? You can do that. And here's how you would do it in 3.0 or 3.5. Not something I was interested in, but the spell compendium, because it was to me the monster manual of spells. It's like spell, 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 over and over and over. Just spells as far as the eyes could see. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. The sword and weapons I didn't get. And then I think, what was another one that I thought was really interesting that I could, but I guess with my mentality, maybe the weapon one would have been a good one, right? So the needs may change, or the appeal of certain things that are put out, given a particular product life cycle, may fluctuate for some individuals. And does Wizards consider that when they're putting some things out? I imagine they do. There's probably a lot of these types of wheels are turning all the time at Wizards of the Coast, I'm guessing, and maybe any other company. But we also mentioned and talked about how third parties are going to have to adjust, but they can pivot, right? Like Fraud God Games, Green Ronin, who else puts out a lot of big 5th edition games? I say Kobold Press. Yeah, Kobold Press, another one, right? They can just, and that's what they've done all along. They've run kind of I want to ride in the coattails, may seem a little meh, but that's what they do. And they've done it despite going to 5th edition. 4th edition was a little wonky. because I think they Wizards shut out a lot of those publishers for some reason, and they stayed away, even though there might be some debate on whether if they came out with 4th edition and there's rules, and I wanted to make a supplement to it, what is the risk in making that supplement? If the license isn't adequate, right? There is, my cat has really got me on edge this morning. He's been in and out of his litter box a lot. He's had urinary issues. He's in there again, so I'm a little, might be a weekend of vet again. Poor guy. Just got him done with 2 weeks of antibiotics. He's annoying, but, what are you going to do? Anyways. Whew. I better get my breath. All right. What's up, Christian? Good to see you. If you're still there. Mike's Grendelroot low-level campaign was cool. I haven't run it. Just read it. It was cohesive. I have that. I haven't read it. I actually have it in hard copy of it. Should probably take a look at it. Vason. Good times. Some hyperbole. Wayne Peacock, good to see you, man. Prep to determine what happens 5e versus play to find out what happens. Blades in the dark. Yeah. He's going back to Mike's conundrum, Mike Shea, right? Yeah, you have to prep. Low prep. No or low prep. D&D, maybe folks feel more comfortable with some more tangible stuff on the table. One of the other things that was brought up, which kind of can tie into that a little bit, is, Laramie brought up an example of a picture of a monster with a dagger, right? In a maybe a monster manual or beast, Tome of Beast thing or whatever. I think he did, I don't know if it was some support work, but there was an inquiry. He was working for a company doing some side work or something. And an individual wrote in or said, hey, I have a question about this monster. He's got a dagger in his hand. God, he's in the litter box again. He's got a dagger in his hand. But the stat block doesn't list the dagger. What do I do? And Laramie is, of course, don't think about it too much, right? Just don't worry about it. You can do whatever you want to do. Blah. Just do your thing, right? So kind of goes into seeking a lot of advice on how to do something in a role-playing game. And many of us will say, you can do whatever you want. It's okay. The players will never know. Feel free to make it up. Go your own way. It'll be fine. It'll work out in the end. Kind of let go of the support and roll with it. But then I ask, and on the flip side, as a devil's advocate approach to that is, why do some of the, and maybe they may be newer DMs. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I don't think they're newer GMs, maybe more so for folks that are first starting out, because I think they're afraid to screw up, right? And then maybe being called to the floor, and that can be awkward. But they don't realize that they're probably not going to be called to the floor because the players don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And Harrigan was mentioning that's the thing, right? Like you can watch a lot of actual plays, but nobody knows what goes on prior to the video. What might have went into the prep, or how the game master's thinking things might come about, and what problems to throw in front of the players and how that's kind of been derived or come out in play. It's kind of like, hey, how's the bread made? How's the sausage made? I guess, right? That's the better analogy, the more accurate analogy. And so why? And I was saying, well, here, can you blame players and game masters asking questions we might find like, oh, that question's asked again in a Facebook group. Again, like, in podcasting, it's like, how do I grow my audience? And it's like, God, if that question comes up, or what's the best microphone? What's the best microphone? Like I think it's some podcasting groups, that question is like, you can't ask that question in this group. It's illegal, not allowed. Because so many people have done it and there's so many different posts about it, and you just go on the web and just research it. You'll get 50 different people talking about 50 different mics. My point is that when you have these individuals starting out and they have questions about, well, how do I do this? Or how do I tackle that? You give them 3 pretty dense rule books and then tell them to make this stuff up. So it's like, here's the rules and here's everything you need to know, but then you don't really need to know all of it. You could just kind of wing it. And so it's kind of like, don't worry, you can, I kind of equate, and it's probably a bad analogy, equate it to jumping out of an airplane without a parachute and being okay that you're going to land all right. It defies our thinking, right? Like, if I jump out of an airplane without a parachute, I'm going to freaking splat all over the ground. I'm going to die. We say, no, you're not. Like, we're going to defy the laws of physics, and everything will be just fine. You'll land. Might be a little bumpy, but it'll be okay. Like, you can do that. Oh, I don't know about that. I need somebody on my back and do a tandem jump, right? Or even another analogy would be, I got a parachute, but I want a guy on the back, in tandem, so they can pull the chute and know when to pull it, and I don't have to go through all this training and things of that nature. But that's a big one too, is like, what are the hangups of, like, where is that coming from? How is that coming about? Is it just being afraid to not have an answer? Is it afraid to not have the right answer? And I'm not saying like ideas. That's not what I'm looking for. That's not what I'm getting at. Like, if people come to us in a public forum and say, hey, my game is at this really weird crossroads, I'm looking to pick some people's brains. That is not what I'm talking about. Like, creative writer's block kind of things, not so much. More so like, how do I adjudicate this thing? What does this rule mean? And some of it is, if you're really like, this is the way I roll, I'm going to play by the rules. It's very black and white. I want to play strictly by the rules as written, blah. And we all know that some people prefer to play that way, and that's okay. But having system mastery can be tricky. Some people play specific games, looking at Christian, looking at you, dude, if you're still there. And he plays a lot of Savage Worlds because he can say, and then Savage Worlds allows him to play different genre, different settings, but he has mastery over the rules. And so the mastery doesn't really come into question, if there's a rules debate, because Christian knows them all. Which is one way to tackle that. How do you do this? And Christian's probably gone through those, and he's probably one of the people that says, well, this is how, stunned works in Savage Worlds. And this is how you'd put it into place. And he could be the Jeremy Crawford answer guy for the game. But why are those questions, like, people are just play your own game. You can do whatever you want, however you want in your own game. So No. Jeez. Jeez Louise. Jeez Louise. CJ, for me, once the limitations of a rule set start to limit what I want to run in it, that is when I start looking for an alternative. Interesting. Phil says maybe a shelf life. Took 2 years off from running it. Started up a new campaign recently. Sessions 0 and 1 have happened. Have to say, I loved running it again. Converting keep on the Shadowfell. Christian says, I think it's more about when you get tired of trying to squeeze out the experience you're wanting, but maybe not getting it. Right. Yes, for sure. Or has it just become redundant? Like it's a similar experience every time. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing all the time. Like people they do like a certain amount of familiarity, right? That's why I don't want to play anything else. Like my buddy Jeff and those guys, I think they're open to it. But they know 5e. Like they know many of the rules. It's familiar to them. If I ran Tomb of Annihilation and Curse of Strahd and whatever, Rime of the Frost Maiden, it's 5th edition, like maybe they could potentially play all three of those with a very similar character build, right? They could, all right, we ended Tomb of Annihilation. They could continue with the same character, right? We just have to scale appropriately. Or they just, okay, we're going to start another campaign. They create another character, different name, but it's vaguely familiar, right? On the other hand, there's other players that are like, throw that one away. Let's do something totally different. And they come up with a completely different character concept. Play that play that storyline out and enjoy it. And it's great and it's fun. And that's it, right? Many of us going to what Christian was saying could be, well, we did that. There's a similar cadence to it. It was great when I started. It was great in the middle, but now I'm kind of like, do I want to play another D&D 5th edition, published or non-published? Maybe it's like homebrew. DM comes up with their own stuff. Yet it's, I want to try something else. Like, I don't know, I want to build a keep, or I want it to be more gritty, whatever that is, and maybe more lethal. And those things can be done in 5th edition, but their group or their experience hasn't been that. So they want to try that other thing, right? It's like how we try other things. I can only eat steak, starting out in life every night of the week for the first 2 years or 3 years, because, babies eat steak. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I think there's a point where you're like, I just want to try that other thing, because maybe somebody says it's really cool, which is good. I think that there's some merit to that for sure. Right. CJ even says, so if I want a political game and 5e doesn't fit, time to look around. Different game. Hey, what's up, Larry? Yeah, different camera angle. I got a new camera. Hi. I do have the old one. It's right there. Sometimes I use it. Anyways. CJ says, Christian nailed it for my experiences, at least. What's up, George? Good to see you. Yes, regarding tyranny, etc. Yeah. Off topic, nice top shelf bookends. Top shelf bookends. Oh, behind me? Right here? Right over here? These? Yeah, thanks. Or like they're stone, like probably Foch marble. CJ, is the argument that the quality is not there compared to adventures in previous D&D editions? If so, I would argue some of the second edition stuff in the realms was less than awesome in my experience. Yeah, see, that's like because that's bordering on like, what do you prefer? And then why do you like it? Why don't you like it? Well, I like it because I like peanut butter. Well, I like it because I like chocolate. And then it's like, well, I don't like either. I like both, but not together. The hard one. Because it's all personal preference and choice, right? Dorigo, good to see you. Every edition has been bigger. 4E was bigger than 3.5. Not trolling, I have no idea. And that's my understanding. Now, I could be wrong, but I thought, let's face it, we may not have played 4th edition, but a lot of us bought it. And then maybe that's just core books. I don't know. I'm pretty sure. It was probably also more popular as more people came into it. Like, there's some people that started with 4th edition. Yeah, I think so. I'm pretty sure. Maybe 4th edition was the only edition. Maybe that was an exception. 3rd was bigger than 4th and 5th was bigger than 4th. That's possible. I could be wrong. Dorigo's looking at me like, I don't know. I'm like, well, maybe, yeah. George says, I do think layout is a factor. OSE and a few others showing how depth can be achieved without something that looks like an encyclopedia. That is still interesting to me. Like, OSE got a lot of hype. Great layout. Gavin Norman did a great job on it. A lot of people are like, Gavin needs to tackle these, RPGs, because they could use some facelifting and organizational skills and things of that nature. But it's like, but he's like, just, hey, I'm going to take BX and it's like he didn't have to come up with a new game. Just, which to me is like interesting. Magic Item Compendium was good. Yeah, no, that's a good one. You're right. That's the other one I got. Not the Arcana one. The Magic Item Compendium and the Spell Compendium. Those two, right? That's the kind of the magic gear. Because if you get one book that's like, hey, Star Wars has the gadget book. In my opinion, if I have that, that's all the gear that's ever going to come up in the game, hopefully. So it's kind of like the one book, be all end all book on gadgets and gear. So all laser blasters, manacles. What was the rope? The rope thing. Elastic rope? No, that's not what it was. Shit. I can't remember what it's called at Star Wars. It had a kind of goofy name. We'd always laugh at it. But if you get those like master books, you get PHP and it's thin. Maybe it's just the base rules, whatever. I don't know. And then you have a book of just classes that you'll ever need and all the spells you'll ever need, and that's it. That's, I think, something that a value that I appreciate. So if I bought Star Wars, I got the core Edge of the Empire, and I got the gadget book and all the starships, that's a lot of Star Wars. Somebody would say, but Sean, as players, we need options. Like Brett's group, he's talked about how they will play, some of the older school stuff like AD&D. And if you don't put Unearthed Arcana in it, things get limited pretty quickly from base Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. But his group also has a very big appreciation for Pathfinder, like 1st edition, because in their eyes, the options that you get in a Pathfinder with the different builds allows everybody to be different. Like, even in a group of 5, you could have 5 fighters and all of them would be different because all of them could pick different feats and different skills and different archetypes and da-da-da-da-da. Where in AD&D, if you're fighter, you're fighter. So some of us would argue when you're playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and you have 5 fighters at the table, they are all different because you're going to play them differently. They're different characters. You portray them differently. They think differently because there's 5 different players playing those characters. It doesn't have to be annotated on a sheet because one knows, crushing blow feat, and the other one is sneaky fighter guy with, super sneak as a talent, and that differentiates the two. Some would say it's differentiated in play, right? Through play and not through build. I don't think there's a wrong or right answer in those, by the way, right? It's a style choice. And it's an interesting one because, I could play OSE and then I can flip the switch and go and play something like Pathfinder. And the reasons I like either game are drastically different. Some would even say maybe even conflicting, but I can still have an appreciation for both. What somebody might not like is if they're both in the same game. Like, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Know what I'm saying? Whoosh. Yeah. Goodman puts out a lot of 5e. Sure. I wonder if they make more off the 5e or DCC. How old is the cat? George, that's a good question. He's not that old. He's grossly overweight. And male cats, urinary issues. I don't know. I can't. God, how long have we had him? 6 years? And he was probably, we didn't get him as a kitten. He was a rescue. It's hard to say. Jumbo's older. Cat's coming up because I was talking about it earlier. George, regarding you can just wing it. Some games are less willing to commit to a system or subset of rules, and you can do it is nothing like X works well on this game. Sure. For sure. Yeah. Well, yes. Right. Yeah. I think what you're saying, George, is some games will encourage the, it's more abstract. You can just kind of go with the flow, where some are it has to be done in a particular way. I think in spirit, some of us would say, well, even if it's really hard coded, you can, in the spirit of RPGs, still come up with a ruling on. Many role-playing game core books, usually if it's a GM based game, is usually like, hey, the GM has kind of the rule breaker, and what they come up with is the way to go. If there's ever something that is not able to be clearly defined by the rules as written. George says, I'd prefer either a ton of rules or a lighter set. The middle, not so much. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Lucas. Wow. Lucas appears. Lucas. What's going on, Lucas? Stay warm. Heard Nebraska's really cold right now. George. Yes, those stone bookends. I need some. They're pretty heavy. I like them. They keep them up for sure. The bookends right above my head, over here, right there. Can't have enough Star Wars. Victor Wyatt. Good to see you, Victor. I remember Victor on Google Plus distinctly, the post where Victor traded in a butt ton of his magic cards and went hog wild on Star Wars. And man, I was like, my brain was like, cha-ching, 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 like totaling up his purchase, and it was no joke. So that's pretty funny. Wayne says, depending on how you play or GM games like OSE or Black Hack, your fighter can be different without feats. Well, yes, we know that, Wayne. Of course, yes. I think that goes without saying. But some would say, I don't agree. So they're defining different, right? Well, you say they're different. I don't think they're different. But they are different. How are they different? It's a fighter. So, I have an 18 strength. You have a 17 strength. Well, I know that. So our ability is different, but it's still a fighter. Like your purpose is to sword and board. Somebody would say, no. My purpose is to, be range guy. But I'm still a fighter. So I think it's like the access to what a fighter has, right? If I play a fighter, these are the things. And, you can get into slicing classes, right? Like, well, what if I play a fighter that's like talks a lot and is adverse to fighting? Is that a bard? Then why not play a bard, right? Like, let's face it. With class-based systems, that's kind of the deal. You ever play with a cleric in the party that never wants to heal anybody? I don't want to heal anybody. That's not my thing. Why are you here? Wayne continues, Dungeon World does this too, of course, because I have to mention DW. It's in the contract. Well, of course you do. I would only expect as much, Wayne. Victor says, can't have too much Star Wars. Brain not awake. Yeah. George, about cat, diabetic issues with cats sometimes too, as you may know. That's a good point. Don't know if he's diabetic. We've had blood tests, so I gotta think that's not the deal. But this might be, he was doing some hopping in and out of his litter box yesterday, deviating to my cat, folks. Called the vet. Even got the litter that turns colors based on the pH of the urine, and they said that's bunk, so don't buy that stuff. I'm like, okay. They said just monitor him, see if he's drinking water and if he's urinating enough, because then 3 hours from now he'll just have a great urine, like great stream, Augie. But I think something's going on. And he doesn't take going to the vet very well, and of course, when you don't take going to the vet very well, you stress out, and stress leads to some of these issues in male, on probably female cats too, but more so in males, my understanding. Anyways, Nubis, hey, good to see you, man. I let my players come up with moves and ideas based on the situation they're in, trying to encourage cinematic moves in a system based on 5e. There's plenty of mechanics to leverage to keep it fair. Yeah. Yeah, so much going through my head. Okay. George, what I meant earlier, Sean, is that a brief line or two in a game about how you could do something in that game isn't always borne out well by the rest of the system. True. Fair. Good point. Victor says 35 to 40 Magic the Gathering cards. 35 to 40. That's not that many. And he had a lot of Star Wars books, let me tell you, folks. George, when you're playing a lighter system overall, it might not matter as much because more rests on the GM's rulings anyhow. Yeah. Like and I've said this before, there is part of me that wants to run like OSE or something really light, like here's your character sheet. You roll 3d6. Like even Colville in his video, or was it Colville's video where he talks about, or was that another video I watched? I think it might have been another video. It was another video. Shit. But they were talking about BX. Actually, specifically basic. Moldvay basic. I'll have to find that video. But it was the pretty popular YouTuber who was imitating a guy who did a review on HeroQuest, and he dressed up in like the knit beard and the knit dwarven hat helm thing. Some of you might have, maybe this is coming too, but But he was talking about, it was like, this was the best game and this is why, and this is this book and it's really great and blah, blah, blah. And he was speaking all gruff and, he's kind of mocking us as a whole. But nonetheless, still trying to get his point across. Like, you rolled 3 to 6, you never rolled 4d6 and dropped 1. This was the way it was, and you lived with those abilities. And there's something simple to that. And I think freeing to me personally, like, there is, like, when I run 5th edition, because I don't memorize a lot, I don't have mastery. I would say, like, nope. I probably have mastery in very few games, actually. And I think because of that, and the reason I don't is probably because I don't want to get caught up with all of that stuff, right? I don't want to memorize a player's handbook or a DMG. So why don't you want to do that, Sean? For me, it would be like, well, maybe I wouldn't say it's a waste of time. It's just not where my interest lies. So some of those games, when I talk about 5th edition and we're running it, presenting the things to the players and having them come up with the solutions to those problems. And if it lies within their character, say, well, I've got this thing on my sheet, or I've got this spell, or I've got this item. This is what I'm going to do. Paladin, I'm going to do smite, then I'm going to bash, and then I'm going to do this. And it's like, that's what I do. That's part of my thing. It's in my toolbox. And boom. A lot of that stuff I put on the players. If somebody's going to sneak or do something, hey, it's a skill check. There's a DC, you roll. Okay, so some of the higher level rule stuff is pretty elementary. Advantage, disadvantage, straight roll. How high should the DC be? Some of those are pretty easy to grok overall. And I think if that's all you keep your game to, it's probably very simple and straightforward. It doesn't have to be what some people consider crunchy or crunchier. I thought he got in the litter box again, man. It's crazy. He's going to end up going to the vet today. I'm just, good times. How to spend a weekend. Yep, sure enough, he is. My fear is that he goes into the litter box and is like, that's not a good experience. And then he starts trying to go outside the litter box, which I think is just ticking. Apologize for cat talk. But going with some of the games, like, for example, OSE or Basic, Expert, Red Box. Here's the situation. What do you want to do? I try to do this. You talk it through. I can do this because my background is, would I be able to do this because of my background? There's a dialogue. And then the game master says, yes, that makes sense. Yes. Okay. And whatever. Maybe there's a roll under, right? Your intelligence, roll under your intelligence. And that'll help me come up with an answer to the question. Like, the subsystem is combat. And I mean, he was even saying, like, basic, every weapon was a D6 in damage. In which case, this kind of from that, I was like, because I think Brett and I talked about it on an episode 2, which was interesting, was, well, then why would anybody want to, carry a sword or carry a hammer or whatever? And then the dungeon master could say, well, you're in a dungeon and the walls are 5 feet wide. You're going to swing your sword around in a 5 foot wide corridor, like a long sword? And that's not happening. So the damage isn't the thing, right? That changes what's going on. It's the form factor of the weapon. It's like, oh, you've got an axe, like a hand axe. You can take a hand axe, chop anything in front of you. Absolutely. But, your long sword's not going to happen. So either you would say you just can't hit, or it's reduced damage because you're always having to do this. And that's part of the weapon, but it's not maybe the the strength that comes with having a long sword. You can poke, but you can't slash. So I think there's an elegance in OSE. When I say OSE is just an example as a kind of a catch-all in this kind of dialogue right now, where you could focus on so many other things. You can think of different things other than, well, is that, wait a minute, hold on. Did the spell that they just cast require concentration because they're casting another spell? Hold on a second, buddy. Your first spell is going to go poof. Oh, whoa, wait, hold on a second. I don't do that. The less that I have to babysit those rules and put them into check, the more I could focus on kind of story and what's really happening in the moment outside of rules, recollection. Like, it's kind of like this analogy. Like, I can put things in this cup that are more, that may be better to the game in the moment than filling it with a bunch of rules and then the rest of the stuff is only this deep. Right? But we all pick our games because of what we appreciate, right? To some degree, or what our players appreciate. Arabian Nights got me Fantasy Flight game Star Wars, Victor says. Oh, is that the Magic the Gathering you're talking about? Set that you got rid of? George Sedgwick, gents, I gotta go. See you later. New baby, 1 week old. Hey! Congratulations, George. Congratulations. We gotta start martial arts training for her. Nice. Yeah. Little ninja. Nothing wrong with that. Get him young, right? He's going in the litter box again. Poor guy. My wife's gonna freak. Off to and it's of course a Saturday, right? So of course, got to go to the emergency vet. He is not going to be happy. The last time I took him into a vet was a follow-up after a 2-week antibiotic regimen. Because he had a bacteria infection, I think. Thought he was in the clear. Done. Well, okay. Well, let's take him to the vet for a follow-up. Of course, did everything except, check his urine. And when I was putting him in the carrier, he freaking peed on me, which is completely odd. I'm like, what in the hell? Well, he can go, which is good. Yeah, he's going to end up going today. There's no question. Shit. Anyways. Might have to cut this a little shorter than, the 3-hour stream. Hey-o, stream. He said stream. Dungeon Craft. Professor DM. Professor Dungeon Master. Bardic Broadcast did the original HQ video. Bardic Broadcasts. The original HQ video. Yes. Maybe. Well, Bardic Broadcast did the original, but I think the one I'm referring to is kind of mocking him. While reviewing Moldve Basic. Nubis, Sean, which systems do you have the most experience in? Which game do you feel you have mastered? I don't think I've mastered any in how I would define it. I know many people that any game that I would enjoy running and have played and run, there's people that know it better. Forbidden Lands is probably creeping up on that. However, if the group said, "Hey, we want to build a stronghold tomorrow," I would be at a dead stop because I haven't read any of the stronghold stuff. So somebody would say, "Is that say that I don't have system mastery on Forbidden Lands?" Knowing stronghold rules and how that operates, is that in order to have system mastery in Forbidden Lands, you need to know all of these details. If that's the case, then I don't. I don't think it requires a ton of system mastery. A lot of it is on the players to begin with, which is probably why I enjoy it. It's somewhat simple to understand. You've got points in skills, points in abilities. and each point represents a d6 or a die 6. And they roll, and there's typically 2 rolls, and the second roll is optional. The talents have, so I haven't played it either. So I think sometimes when we talk about system mastery, it's also very valuable or invaluable to be the player on a I wouldn't say consistent basis, but let's face it, many of us, even with the D&D space, will leave, hey, you're going to play a spellcaster. Well, then you have to know what the spells do. Like, I'm requiring you to come to the table when you cast the spell and understanding what is all involved with that. Many people will look it up, not a big deal, but the game master is, my buddy Doc, he's got it down. Like, when I say he's got system mastery over 5th edition, it's because he knows all of it. Like, if I cast the spell and I'm like stuttering or getting through it or trying to interpret it, he'll correct me without a book in front of him. He'll just like, no, I'm pretty sure that is a 10-foot cone, and it emanates from a space 10 to 20 feet out in front of you and no further. Oh, okay. Damn, dude, seriously? So with Forbidden Lands and some of the talents that the players can choose, I'm taking it at their word that one, they can pick what they want and they have the experience points to invest in that. And then when they use it, they're using it accordingly. Phil. He just left. See you, Phil. Haha. Maybe you didn't hear me. But, and Wayne's not. And Wayne. So that may be, yeah. Star Wars Fantasy Flight Games, maybe. Back in the day, I would probably say even be closer to Star Wars D20 because of D20. So, if you're in the D20 ecosphere back then, you're probably, you could cross over a few, right? I played 3.5 D&D or 3.0 D&D and D20. Everything was D20. Star Wars was D20. The only difference between Star Wars and D&D was the setting and then maybe how the Force was used. And, yeah. So so what is the question? What do you have the most experience in? Which systems? Probably the most experience with systems. Probably Star Wars, Fantasy Flight Games. Then maybe 5th Ed. But still not there, right? We get called out on 5th edition all the time because Sean says something and it's like, no, that's not true. It's in the DMG. You could succeed with a setback if you fail the die roll. Huh. Okay, oops. It's not pass fail. Huh? Delta Green I've ran a few times. I think it's pretty straightforward, but there are some nuances with Delta Green that take shape better over time in a campaign. And almost all my Delta Green games are really one-shots. Granted, the Delta Green experiment with Roger and the crew, Ray Otis, Eileen, Larry, who's in the chat, that was a multiple session single scenario. See you, Joe. Talk to you later. Thanks for stopping by, buddy. Have a great rest of your weekend. So yeah, I don't know if that helps. I'm going to be running Savage Worlds. Forget about it at BSRCon. I run Savage Worlds. I mean, I think it's once a year, and that's usually for Gamehole Con, and it's usually the forget about it scenario. And, it's just with that game, I know, there's no magic. It's going to be modern day, so I don't have to worry about Magic Compendium, or, it's not a science fiction, so I don't have, or the fantasy compendium, and it's not science fiction, so I don't have to worry about science fiction stuff coming into play. I mean, what's going to happen in that game? If there is combat, it's going to be guns and improvised weapons. So what are the rules around that? Armor, they're going to be wearing, a flak vest, maybe at best. There's a moving car. So what is involved with potential chase scenes? So the scope of what, somebody like Christian might run into when he's running Savage World Eberron may be quite a bit different when I'm running a mobster one shot, right? So I wouldn't say I have system mastery with Savage Worlds, but then again, the scope may be a little more narrow. Thanks, Ty. And the cat. Ugh. Victor says the context of a situation can affect a situation as much as the stats of the tool or weapon used. Yeah. Yep. Agree. Christian says system mastery can also mean you just know where to find those rules, or you can make a call that's close enough. Sure. Yes. So I guess then it goes, well, how do we define system mastery? Right? Christian would define it that way. I don't think that's bad. I think I could certainly do that. My take was more like I know the rules, and I can make those calls because I just know them, all of them. That's crazy. I don't think a lot of us have that ability in some of the games, but there are some. I mean, like there's people that they've played AD&D and they know all the rules and they know all the spells because they've been playing it for 30 years. Yeah. And there's people that have been playing, something that maybe hasn't been out as long, that still have a decent amount of that knowledge too. So there is a conversation to be had at the table about how much you are going to value the fiction versus look for game mechanics to fill that stuff in. Yeah. I think that's a big one in session 0. I mean, that's on the list to tackle, I think, and sometimes we do it and sometimes we forget. But I would absolutely say that there is so much in session 0 that we just forget to cover, or we cover and it gets put to the roadside or, placed to the side, and then we forget when we get to that actual crossroad, specifically like that. Here's the deal. We're going to roll. If I know the rule, we're all like, we come to a crossroad or the rule question. If somebody knows it without looking it up, great. We have to trust them because sometimes people just spout stuff they think they know. Brett's fireball thing comes up, right? Fireball, 30-foot radius. No, actually it's not. After looking it up 3 sessions later, and then somebody bringing it up again and saying, no, we did that wrong 3 sessions ago. Let's say you just wing it. If they say it, even if they're wrong, okay, sounds good. I mean, can you imagine though, playing in a game? So you're playing in 5th edition and you're still kind of from the 3.0 days and you're like, oh, this is how it works. And they're flanking and you get a +2 and da-da-da. And all those rules aren't actually part of 5th edition, but your group just keeps rolling with it anyway. Or some would say, well, are you even playing 5th edition at that point? But I would say, yeah, that's kind of the deal. Hey, we're going to go with it. Make it up on the fly with the Forbidden Lands specifically, because Wayne's in that game. We were all learning it at the same time. So I was like, if people we can look it up, and if somebody, we all look it up and we all learn it together, and we can move forward from there. That's kind of the way we'll go. And so I don't think we had a problem stopping. Also depends on what we're doing. Like if Phil's going down the river and drowning, let's not stop that. Let's keep going, and we'll make decisions on the way. So in Pathfinder, he says 4E, 5E, there are very different weapons, stats, feats, and class abilities spell. To tell you what is different about a fighter, about a fighter with a spear versus sword and board. Yeah. Yes, for sure. That's the mentality some of the players in Brett's group takes when it comes to differentiating fighter types. Ty says, what is your fallback system? What is the system you think about when somebody says, let's play RPG? What is the one system over them all that you feel comfortable with? Ugh. Man, it's like saying, what rock band do you listen to when you like want to just sit down and listen to music? So this is a very hard one for me to answer because it depends on the mood I'm in and what I want to play. There'll be times when like, and also it's tricky because are you talking about me running a game or me playing a game? Because those are two different things too. And it also depends on who is running the game, and what the premise is. That's a hard one for me to answer, Ty. Yeah, and I will say it depends. we have a lot of people in the hobby that have their go-to, right? What's your go-to? And I have my handful. I've already mentioned them, right? And they're the games that I typically keep, and I've probably dumped a lot of the other ones. But the list is relatively short. It's 5e, Delta Green, maybe Call of Cthulhu to some degree, but I haven't run a ton of Call of Cthulhu. Masks, but not a lot of the single adventure types. Star Wars, D&D, Forbidden Lands. Yeah, those are the big ones. Yeah, I would say that, right? I think. Wayne says, in Dungeon World, the fiction tells you what is different, and that actually will trigger mechanics / moves. In OSE, the GM is technically responsible for arbitrating this. For some, there will be almost nothing. For, in my humble opinion, good gas. See, Jim, it will make a difference in what you can do as a fighter. Ty says, I know for me it is Fey. Fey, yeah, accelerated, right? Gas. GM autocorrect. Oh, get gas. For in my humble opinion, good GM, see Jim, it will make a difference in what you can do as a fighter. Ty says, I see RPG. I started reading that. Got to get back to it. Roman lives close enough. DMing is basically how I roll. Yeah, nothing wrong with that, for sure. For sure. Christian says, put it to you this way. Even Clint Black had to look up Savage World rules on occasion, usually because he's seen 5 different versions of it before it went to print. There's those stories, right? About game developers not knowing their own game. Which is, I think, more surprising to us because we think they would know their own game, right? Because they wrote it. It's like ingrained in them. How could you not? Like, you probably mulled over this stupid rule for like hours. And I know Monty Cookett, I think, is pretty much the same way, right? Like, I don't know, just roll with it. I can't remember what that rule was. So I think we perceive that or think about it when I think you're right, Christian. It's more that component, right? There's a lot of, Clint Blacks and Shanes that are out there that don't remember the rule as written as much as we like to think that they do. There's just a lot, man. There is a lot. Even the AD&D Player's Handbook, when I got it, little print, art throughout to some degree, but not, maybe I mean, there might be 1 or 2 full pages of art, not a, as it is today, but it's also a thicker book. But can you imagine, like, we're gonna play this game? Okay, cool. Here's the player's handbook. You are the player. Here's the player's handbook, and giving that to somebody who's completely oblivious to role playing games, and then they start paging through it, and it's like, what? I don't think it's like that as much today, but I mean, let's face it, an AD&D player's handbook is pretty thin, comparatively speaking, to today's 5th edition player's handbook. So there's a lot of stuff in those things. But again, when I get into those books and going to what Ty was kind of poking me at about in system mastery, or what is your go-to, or what do you feel most familiar with, or what have you run the most of? And I think it really comes down to, what are the real core mechanics and how many subsystems there are, and maybe meta mechanics. I say meta mechanics, or like meta currencies that are involved. And how do those all play together? Because if I think to me, when I first read 5th edition and I kind of absorbed it, you get the first player's handbook of the new D&D edition, and you start diving into that thing. And the first thing you're doing is, they're all similarly laid out, right? Since AD&D shit, probably even all the way back to basic, it is crazy, the sequence of the book. Like, they're all very, very familiar to us, because they're all really like, well, this is, we talk about what a role-playing game is, and then we talk about dice and what a die is and what types there are. Like a D, like when we want to roll an 8-sided die, it's a D8. And then it shows a picture of the dice. And then it goes into maybe character creation and rolling the dice and the abilities. And then once you have that done, it's maybe the modifiers to those abilities. And then it goes into, races. And this is D&D specific, mind you. And then it goes into the races. And then the races have modifiers to those abilities. And then it goes into classes. And then the classes have, modifiers, and then they get special things because of the class. And you could do different things. And, the thief has thief skills. And there's, 6 of them? Pickpockets, move silently, climb walls, hide in shadows, use magic item, 5. Use magic device, Pretty good, huh? Not bad. And then it gets into, gear, and then, or skills and gear and equipment, and then magic, maybe, right? And then maybe it gets into combat or movement. And some more of that was fleshed out with 3.0, probably making it a little bit bigger, and positioning and, line of sight, right? Because you could have line and sight and cover, and then you'd have cover rules. Like if you were on a corner and you could draw a line to one square to another, you would have line of sight. But if that line hit anything else other than one corner, then there would be cover involved. And so what I'm getting at, even with spells to some degree, haven't really changed, right? There's a duration to cast. There's a casting time. There's a duration of the spell. There's the effect of the spell. There's what happens when somebody encounters this. So what's the save, or the effect component and the save to prevent it from happening. And then kind of that piece. That hasn't changed a ton either. So when I look at something like 5th edition and I'm reading it and it's the first time, I think to myself, okay, how are they doing these things? How are these being accomplished? With Pathfinder, it was CMB and CMD. It's like, oh, that's how they did some counter rolls, right? Opposed checks in grappling and to solve some of those things, because they kind of took the things you all had to add up and just put them all into one number. Like, add all these, this is the number. You don't have to take this number sometimes and not other times. So when I going back, right, 5th edition and reading it, you're like, oh, okay. So there's difficulty class, which comes from, right, 3.0. Difficulty class. What are those? Maybe it's 10, 15, 20, right? 5-point increments. 10, average, no problem. Roll it when you need to. I mean, shit, there's DC 5s. There's DC 5s out there, right? Come on. Great. There's take 10, take 20 in some editions. So some of those things change over time, but let's get rid of all those kind of like situational stuff. And really what does it come down to? And if you like, hey, this is the way I run 5th edition. I come up with the DC. You roll against it. If you meet it or exceed it, you are succeeding. And if you don't, then there's either a succeed with a setback or you fail. And it doesn't work and it doesn't move forward. And if there is like a favorable situation, then I will allow you to have advantage on your roll. And you can roll 2d20 against that same DC. Or you have an unfavorable situation, in which case you roll disadvantage and you take the worst. Rinse, repeat. I mean, that's, to me, in my brain, if I know that and I adjudicate it as a game master that way all the time, all the rest could be either made up or run off the cuff, or it's the spirit in which those things are, other than spells, really, because then spells kind of come into play. And yep, there's a DC in spells, right? Because it's a DC save. And, there's a skill check. Well, that's a check, and that's the same thing. There's a DC. What else? Combat, to some degree, right? You could say another DC, because that one's based off of the other person's armor. Okay, great. And then you minus the hit points. Pretty simple, I would say. Nothing like a software update splash screen that comes up in the middle for no reason, even if you didn't even launch anything. Ty says, I think system mastery is knowing enough of how the game is put together that you understand their attempt of what the rules are, that you can make a judgment call that you feel is 90% correct. Chris is agreed. Yeah. I would chew on that for sure, Ty. I would think that's pretty accurate. And I think that's what I'm going at. Like 90% of the game, maybe, I don't know. When it comes to a rule piece in 5th edition specifically, it's that. When you start getting into more different like subsystems and different situations, like, give an example. I think this is Sean. If it's a game that can boil it down to something elementary like that, then it's something that I'm okay with. If it goes beyond that, then I will get lost or I won't care. I'll still play it. I won't think it's a bad game. It's not whether I like it or not. It's just all that other stuff is just, I don't keep it here. And if I don't keep it here, then I either have to reference it every time a certain situation comes up with, or it's just going to be hand waved and we're going to default to advantage, disadvantage, DC, blah, right? Or it's roll some dice, compare them, chase scene, roll. Like you both start out at 0. He's ahead of you. You're behind them. Just said the same thing, different way. You roll a die, I roll a die. We'll add a couple modifiers to it because they're a better driver than you. You win, you move closer to them, and you get to do something. Like now you're not behind them, you're alongside of them, or you can run into them, right? Like there may be a chase system that may incorporate some of those details, but there may be some nuances like, well, there's a maneuver that they can do. And if they do this maneuver, then it allows them to get a plus even on top of their roll, on top of their driving skill. And then, and don't forget the obstacles that get thrown out in front. And if there's an obstacle, then there's a penalty. And then all that shit's like advantage, disadvantage. Like, hey, a cart moves in front of you. You're doing your check. Give me disadvantage. And I'm not going by the chase rules right here. Chase rules, and some players won't like that approach and some players won't care. We just got to move. Got to keep going. Cool, man. That's fine. Works. It's fair. Is that fair? Say it's fair. Jim. Hey, Jim. He says, I usually house rule a couple abilities for fighters in OSE. Parry with high dex. Shield shall be splintered. But I do also like letting players improvise, and then I make rulings. I don't want to codify everything, but sometimes a bit of a prompt helps get players' minds going. Yeah. In some of these games, it really, okay, you have the rules and you have the game master. And sometimes it just comes down to the players. Like, are the players enthusiastic? Do they want to kind of take a proactive role in what they're trying to accomplish and absorb what's around them? So if they're in a bar brawl and, they're like, I look at the table, I'm looking for like an object. Do I see an object of any kind? The DM could easily say, nope, there's nothing on the table. But how fun is that? Like, you're in a bar, there's probably something on the table. Yep, there's a big, frickin' flask of something, a big, a metal urn of water that's poured on the table. Like, I grab that thing and I frickin' smash it across this guy's head. Yeah, great. It wasn't there more than 5 minutes ago. Blah, 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 rinse, repeat. And if you get those players, especially like even GMs, when they know they've been behind the screen, they know the difficulties of game mastering and the struggles. This is a good example. Like recently in a Forbidden Lands game, they were coming through it here, not to rehash these things, Phil. He's not on, Wayne. But they were doing a river crossing. Fairly simple, could be tricky. And it was raining. Like if it wasn't raining and there wasn't like a rapid section and the water was low enough or there was some type of bridge to help them, that all plays a part in this. But the situation is it's a river so wide. It's like, what was it? Raging furlong or something, like, it's in the name that it's raging part of the river. And it was raining. So the guys had a good approach. Like one of the guys is going to take a chance and go across with a rope. Wayne's character goes across, no problem, has the rope. And of course, it's like, hey, just give me one roll to make sure you don't slip, right? Because Forbidden Lands isn't keep rolling and keep rolling. It's like make one roll and they've done whatever it incorporates. And he gets across, no problem. Next guy, Phil, Dwarf. Now he's got a rope, which I would say, okay, add a die to the rope. And then I would say, well, but it's raining. So take a die away. So it's a straight roll. And he fails. All right. And I think he even failed with not only, in Forbidden Lands, you don't succeed in the test. And then if you push and fail, then there's, a mishap. So of course, we'll roll on, the mishap. He slips and falls in the river and the rope breaks. Okay, now he's going down the river. Now that's a whole ordeal. And during this situation, I could have stopped and said, well, and a couple people were like, as we were kind of figuring this out, a couple of people were like, hey, when you're in armor, right, you're taking on water and it says this in the rule book. Okay, great. Fantastic. I wasn't going to stop and look it up. We incorporated that because it was, okay, he's going down the river. What are you going to do? You're next. Well, I'm going to run down the bank and I'm going to try to get ahead of him so I can pull him, throw something in front of him, pull him to the side, whatever the case is. So there's a lot of, I got to really do something here in the moment because Phil's character is going to take on water and drown. But as we did this, there wasn't like, oh, okay, fell in the river rules. And through 49 rolled dice and not a single success on any of them, it would be easy to say, dude, I got to just kill your guy, right? Like, how many dice rolling opportunities are you going to have before you like succumb, right? Now, Phil is the type of guy who's like, yeah, if I die, that's cool. I'm down with that. It's not a big deal. And then there are some that are like, don't let it fall to the dice rolling to kill a character, right? You can make it worse and worse and worse. And so it's kind of like that approach. And frankly, what is more interesting? Like, oh, you fall in the river and you go down and you die. Or is it, you're banging off the rocks. Oh, and this person throws a branch in front of you and you fail to see that and you miss it. And then you keep going. You're choking on water, Oh, and by the way, Phil was on the border of being broken in Forbidden Lands. And that's bad news, being broken. And being broken is when one of your abilities hits 0. So if it's strength and you're broken, you're in a lot of trouble because you're not going to be able to move. Like, you're going to crawl at best because your strength's gone. If you take, 0 and you're hurt or you're broken in empathy, well, that has its own repercussions. And so they finally, got him to the end and somebody kind of saved him. But it was a kind of discussion amongst the entire party because there were lots of the players were involved in what they had to do to help Phil and his character and the dwarf. But at the core, when I was adjudicating it, it was still this is the system. Maybe there were a couple like, instead of the standard die pool, 6s are a success on the first roll. If you push, 1s come into play. Okay. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's all right. But going back to the advantage, disadvantage, blah, blah, blah. So instead of that, some of those I had to go, well, I need a kind of random determiner of whether this happens. Like, hey, do we see this like big long branch hanging out over the river? Coincidentally enough. And some would just say, yes, there is. It just happens to be there. And so sometimes those decisions by the game master can be very like, oh, how convenient. Like, and the players will be like, yay, right? So how do you get rid of everything I come up with, I just get, or everything the players come up with, I just give as a game master? You just make a random roll and you give them a higher odds. Like, cause if you want them to succeed, you go, hey man, if you roll a 4, 5, 6, 3, 4, 5, 6 on a D6, there's a big branch and it's about to break into the river. And all you would have to do is just climb out a little bit, wrench on it, and it would break and snap. You roll a 1 and 2, you don't see one in sight. Doesn't mean there isn't one because the river's long. You just don't see one where you are or, this amount of feet in front of Phil. That also adds a little tension to the game, which can be fun, right? Oh, I got pretty good odds. Wah, wah. If you got a party and you're giving them good odds and everybody's failing, it becomes, people start laughing, their eyes start rolling. Some groups may be throwing dice out the window or melting them into puddles of plastic. Whatever it is, it gets to become almost so absurd, and you almost have to laugh because if you didn't, you'd cry because it's just going so awry. But at the same time, yeah, okay, I'll break the system and just go, okay, give me a random roll. Like, well, what do I need to roll, right? What's high? What's low? What's the percentage? Like, it's, you got a 20% chance. Roll. What do I need to roll? You can roll a percentile. You can roll, what's 20% on a D20? Like, if you roll under this number, boom, you're fine. And it happens. So it's some of those things too. But my point is, you can go off the system and just make it up and make it just fair. And you know what? I don't think I had one single person that was like, well, that seems off. Like, that's kind of unreasonable. Like, I think it should be higher. And frankly, even if there was a player that said, hey, I think there might be a higher chance of that happening or whatever, if they brought it up, I'd say, okay, that's fair. Okay. Okay. Or no, not really, because it's raining, and that's going to affect, your ability to hold on to something. Anyways. Yeah. Victor says, I don't have a general go-to game. I have different go-to games for different genre. Yeah. Christian says, we hold ourselves to a higher standard of rules mastery than the game designers do. Yeah. Yeah, the game designers, I don't know a lot that have their own podcasts other than Ken and Robin. They talk about games and all kinds of stuff, but I don't, and some of us have access to like Shane and Clint Black and some of those guys, and they, you can talk to them and hear about it. But we don't know that, right? You can listen to a podcast or a YouTuber or something like that, and there is a, again, perception when you get more of that in your face that DMs and GMs have to be at a certain knowledge level or mastery level. And then the developers of the actual game go, not really. You don't. You kind of go with it, and it's okay to kind of go off book. And I do it all the time. And frankly, I can't remember a few of my own rules I've had to look up or, make a judgment call. I think a lot of thing too that we didn't cover or touch on, Christian, is sometimes I think these guys have to put rules into place because people are like, I don't know what to do. And so they're like, well, in order to kind of make it smoother, we'll spell it out. And they put it in a book. And frankly, some of those developers we put it in the book for people, like for consumers. Clint Black, if you're not familiar with who Clint Black is, he's very big and instrumental in the Pinnacle Entertainment. He's like Shane's right-hand person with Savage Worlds. But, those folks may just be, I never use that rule, and yet they wrote it. And the only reason they put the rule in there is because it kind of makes sense, and maybe they want to clear up, they may get hit with the same question over and over and over and over and over again. And where Clint and, some of us may just say, well, or I say Clint and Shane as developers of the game, they never use it, but they have to put it in the game because they don't want to answer that question anymore. And it's like, hey, it's right here in the game. You can just reference it. Or you can just don't worry about it and do your own thing and adjudicate it how you will. Dorigo, AD&D first edition, PHB, tiny print and not nearly as much art. Yeah, it's a little, so comparatively speaking, I wonder what the word count is. It might be the same. I mean, let's face it too, a lot of these players' handbooks of these trad games are, going to be filled with all these talents, all the skills, all the magic items, all, not magic items, spells probably, talents, feats, those are things that I don't think a game master, in my opinion, has to memorize. There's just so many. And so I think when you take like D&D 5th edition, you go, what are the rules? What do I need to know as a game master to run this game? Advantage, disadvantage, DC, roll high, know the different dice, provide problems or present problems to the players, have them come up with solutions, have them roll dice to find out the outcome. If you want, you don't even have to have them roll. If you don't think it's going to be interesting based on the outcome, good or bad. The rest is, sure, maybe some movement, right? Movement, action economy always kind of slides in there. Many have, because they come from, RPGs come from the tabletop miniature space, right? Miniature wargaming. There's always there's a conflict. That's what it is. We shouldn't say combat. It's a conflict. What are the conflict rules? What is the conflict system? And is conflict combat? Then okay, here it is. Is conflict social? Well, here's that, right? And they could be one and of the same. Star Wars. The beauty of Star Wars FFG is you're using the narrative dice for everything. If you're piloting a ship, it's the same as if you are a character. If you're fighting a Sith Lord, it's, force powers. A little bit different. There's a force die involved, but you're still running purple, green, yellow, red dice. And they all stand for something, and it's a pool, and you're kind of shuffling in and out, setting the difficulty, upgrading the difficulty. And so I like that system because even when you go down the feat trees, or the talents is what they are in Star Wars, and players are buying those, all it's doing is allowing them to manipulate that die pool to some degree. Most all of them. Like if there's a blue setback die, you can remove one. If you have this and you're trying to do this, well, you always get an extra black die. That's and rinse repeat for all those classes, or what do they call them? Professions. So I don't need to know a lot of weird one-off, wacky subsystem meta mechanics stuff necessarily. And I think that's where I think some game masters appreciate certain games because they can kind of go, oh, got it. The tricky thing is like, when you venture into another game, how do those change? So Savage Worlds, target number 4, everything's done in 4s. And, when you're doing range, it's target number 4. And then if you're melee, there's a parry component. Some of the armor plays a role in it. There's bennies. But how overall does it work? Cards used for initiative, so it's unique, and Savage Worlds is fast, furious, and fun. And some have argued, no, it's not the fast piece. I don't know. There is miniatures components because that's another piece of what Savage Worlds kind of derived from. They're either up, down, or off the table, right? So some very simple elements to the game. But there's, how do the bennies work? And some of those things are very clearly defined and easy to understand. And then there's a lot of Savage Worlds people that, this is how I use bennies in my game. It's a little bit different. Like I use the core piece, but then I, reward them in a different manner. And Suede has changed things a little bit too, which I have to touch up on. So I can't really speak really intelligently about the difference between the Adventurers Edition and the Expedition. Yeah. Would-be word count is close. Yeah. Bet the word count is close. Jim, I used ad hoc D6 rolls all the time for things that don't depend on a PC skills or abilities, like is there a low branch, or is there a tankard of ale on the table? Yeah. Yeah, because I think when you don't use the die in those instances, what determines whether there is one there or not? And if you don't use a die system to do it, then it's going to be more GM fiat. Well, it's because the GM just determines based on whatever they want. If Sean's in a pissy mood that day because he had a shitty day at work, well, then guess what? No, there isn't a tankard of ale that you can pick up and smash on the guy's head. Nope. So that alleviates Sean's just being a dick. Or Sean's being overly kind, like he's pulling punches by providing everything we just ask for. Instead of just, you're right, Jim, and doing it randomly, even if you do the odds in the player's favor or not, at least there's a chance, and it's not a whimsical thing the game master just decides, which is okay in other situations, I think. But, there is a difference. And if you just allow the players to be like, hey, just roll and see. So yeah, if you roll a 1 on this die, sure. 1 out of 6. It's not too good, but I guess I'll roll. Okay. But that's, why is it a 1 out of 6? Well, this is why. And sometimes as a game master, we kind of got to spell that out a little bit, because then the players aren't going to go, what? Just a 1 out of 6, dude? Well, this is why. It's raining. The tunnel is spinning. You have a dragon coming down on top of you. And you just had a character in your party die. Like, that's not favorable conditions. So that's why. Oh, well, now that you spelled it out, got it, right? It's not sometimes, I think, the proposal, it's not how or the decision, it's why or how you came up with that particular decision. And then players kind of go, oh, okay, that makes more sense. And I think that alleviates a lot of this weird GM versus player conflict. And I think that's why, some players over time have lost trust with game masters, and it becomes more adversarial, us versus them, because of that. And I am testimonial to that. Like I get, I have friends that will be like, see, Sean, stuck it to you. Yeah. And they get excited. I'm like, damn it. I didn't make it difficult for him. You killed my guy. Like, and most of that's out of jest, but it also facilitates that Sean's trying to get us and we got to overcome whatever he puts in front of us, which is true. They do. But to be a true kind of judge or an arbitrator of the rules, it helps to kind of just say, I think the more we say, hey, it's not me, right? It's the dice, or hey, it's not me. It's kind of like a combination of things. I'm not just pulling these things out of my butt to do you wrong, right? And that helps. Some games have meta currency, and that empowers players to add that branch or mug to the scene. Yeah, that's true. And if it does have a meta currency, and there's a back and forth, like there's light side, dark side in Star Wars, there's bennies, there's momentum in Star Trek Adventures, there's Doom in Conan 2D20. Is it momentum on the flip side and Doom for the game master, I think, in Conan 2D20? Jim's played a few of those. Gabe, I don't know if you're here, but when you get meta currencies, then then you don't have to roll. Then you're like, yep, you can spend it. Spend that and it's there. Cool. That's what I'm going to do. All right. Boom. Done. Nubis, I try to use common sense, but I'm very lenient. Maybe switching to a die roll would be a good change. I don't think that's bad, and if your players are used to it, great. But if you change, and that's what the way you've rolled, make sure they're aware of, like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to just roll. I don't know if it needs to be spelled out sometimes. Sometimes it does, because sometimes it's a shock to the players when it's like, wait a minute, you used to just be able to be like, you used to be so cool, man. Yo, Dad, you used to be so cool. You were like totally down with this stuff, but now you're like harshing on my gig, man. So I think, it's just something to be conscious of what game you're playing and how the players get that. But I think most players would understand, as long as, again, when it comes to RPGs, a lot of this comes down to what's fair. It's fairness. It's refereeing. It's judging. Judging can be a little, is it a judge? Are you judging me? But you're judging. You're kind of like since you're the arbitrator of the rules. Arbitrator. Anyways, then the judge comes into place. Like DCC uses the name judges, but you just had it's the. I still think, like, even you're like, well, I'm gonna say it's like a 3, 4, 5 type chance, and then if you move it around, right, the goalposts, then it's based on different issues, different things that are playing a role, because there's a lot of, Star Wars is all about that. My skill, my ability, green and yellow, right? That's the good dice for me, and then the difficulty is purple. So, the elegance of that game is the difficulty can be the same all the time. You're driving a speeder, the difficulty is always 1 or 2. Always. That doesn't change, which is cool, right? Like driving a car, the difficulty of driving a car doesn't change if you've got your driver's license. Okay. Assume everybody's got their license. The difficulty of driving a car is, I think, 2, maybe average. Oh, but it's rush hour and you're being chased by a group of ninjas on motorcycles. And it's in the middle of January in Wisconsin and you just had, 5 inches of snow. Like, for every single thing that you're bringing into that situation, you're awarding one, not difficulty, setback die. 1 setback die for that. 1 setback die for that. 1 setback die for that. And then the players are trying to get rid of those, right? And they could just be left up to their skill and ability, or, a person is injecting themselves into the situation that will hopefully alleviate one of those. Like, we've got a siren, and wait a minute, this is an unmarked police car. Shouldn't there be like some weird thing we could put up on the top of the hood with a red light and a siren in here? Yes, there is. I hit that. Okay, I'm going to remove the setback dice for the traffic, because the traffic just ends up parting because they think you're a police officer. They're all pulling away, getting out of the way. You're like, good, boom, that setback is gone, but it's still snowy. So, that is, to me, just fantastic. It's a fantastic model of taking environmental pieces and applying mechanics and simple mechanics, die types, right? Black, blue, and then rolling the dice and looking at the results and narrating what happens. I don't know. I just have a very fond appreciation of that Star Wars game and how that initiates that. And there are other games that you can do that to, right? Savage World, same thing. D&D, maybe. D&D, probably not similar because you're not driving a car. But nonetheless, okay, it's a disadvantage. How many more disadvantage can you pile on? In that same situation, if you were running a modern game and you were using the D&D 5th edition mechanics for a modern game, how would you adjudicate that? Well, you have your driver, right? So you have a skill, you have your ability, right? So you get a +4. You gotta roll a d20. There's a DC as a standard. Well, what's that DC based off of? Right? It's kind of like everything. And then, it's the snow. Okay, so that's a disadvantage. Okay. And then you get the 4 ninjas. Great. So you really gotta hammer and do some things within that to figure it out. That's why some of these Forbidden Lands games, and I think that's the difference, right? If you take Forbidden Lands and Star Wars or Mutant Year Zero games, and you versus a D&D 5th edition game, and you look at those and you're like, those other games you can take a die away, put a die in, take 2 dice away, put 2 dice in, vice versa, blah, blah, blah. And you're just doing this all day. It just, in my opinion, can help facilitate some of the all moving parts that are going on. And the players are going to love it. They're like, oh, shit, yeah, if you're doing something, okay, you're going to just drive a car? Yeah, you can drive a car. You don't even have to roll. Oh, you're going to drive a car in the snow. All right, 1 setback dice. You're going to roll a driving skill. And are you doing anything special? No. Okay, then you can just make a driving skill. Oh, you're going to go fast? You're going to speed? Okay. So the DC in the 5th edition, right? Okay, DC. All right, now there's different things being applied. How do I throw that in? Be fair and figure what that looks like so that the players are like, okay, that makes sense. That sounds fair. Let's see how this goes. Wayne says we call that the die of fate. Fate 1, or 1 equals the worst, 6 is the best. Not sure where the appellation came from. Wayne's talking. Ty, if an item is around the table in a bar fight or not, is how common could the item be found in a bar? Yeah, I think so, right? It is totally uncommon. If it is totally uncommon and you want it, well, it costs a fate point to have the item. Agreed, right? Yes. So if the player was like, hey, I'm looking for a sword. Is there a sword on the table? Okay. Is there a chance that there is a sword in the bar? Yes. Is there a chance to have the sword lying on the table that they just happen to be standing next to? Small percent. And I would say maybe an adventurer came in and is like, I'm tired for the day. They just took off it's like, a cop with their utility belt. Like, I'm tired, I'm off duty. And they just take off their belt and they plop it on the table because they want to sit in a chair comfortably and, relax. Sure. Is it more likely that it's going to happen? Maybe not. So you lower the chances of it occurring. Yeah, man, absolutely. You got that going through your brain. You're gonna probably solve half the world's problems in an RPG. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. Harrigan, yeah. What's up, late bloomer? Hey, morning, sunshine. Morning. I think calling it the Die of Fate comes from World of Dungeons, but I'm not positive. It certainly has its roots in the AD&D DMG. Ty says, or Vespas and Boba are casing you. Yeah, Boba. The Book of Boba Fett. I'm behind in that. Catch up. Ty says, I love narrative systems from Star Wars, Genesis. Yep. Would or could you see doing a Forbidden Lands in a Star Wars FFG system? I think you can run Genesis, right? The only thing is, Ty, I will say, is that Forbidden Lands is a fantasy survival game. So if you run it, because Forbidden Lands it's not even setting necessarily, because you can use Hot Springs Island, whatever, but it has to lean on a survival piece, right? You can't use Genesis to run Forbidden Lands and not have the survival piece, in my opinion. You can, yes, you can, Sean. Yes, you can run it, but if you don't make it a survival component in the game, then you're really not embracing what Forbidden Lands is out to do. So I would say you can run a fantasy game with Genesis because they have it, right? They have Terranoth or whatever the fantasy setting is for Genesis. But, Forbidden Lands relies on, some resources or consumables like water and food. Like, you make water and food rolls at the end of the day. And if you run out, that prompts the players to have to make different decisions. And it's a good way to manage resources because you're not drink water, tick off a tick mark on your sheet. It's conceptual, right? It's die type. And so, yes, you can run Forbidden Lands, but keep in mind Forbidden Lands is a survival fantasy game. And if your players are not on board on that type of concept, and so with that statement comes certain expectations from the game master and the players. So for example, I'll give you an example. In this, again, going to the Phil River crossing here again, which I explained a little earlier. Phil is a dwarf and he's a fighter type and he can roll like 12 D6s when he attacks, right, in combat. He's going to freaking waste a lot of my monsters and things that I put in front of him in combat. But I told, and these guys, we all laughed because combat's not going to kill these guys. It could be the weather, right? Because you have fighter skills. Like, you could be the greatest martial art person in the world. If you're freaking climbing a mountain and you lose your winter jacket and your tents because they come untied and slide all the way down the mountain. It doesn't matter how powerful a martial artist you are, you're going to freeze to death. And that's Forbidden Lands. You can do things like you can incorporate talents that'll probably combat that. But I think if I go into the talents, and Harry can correct me if I'm wrong, Kerrigan and Wayne are both in that game, I doubt there's a lot of talents that combat the environment. There probably are some, but if they're not, it's a distinct decision that I'm guessing Free League made in making that game. Yeah, we could have them all, hey, a talent allows them. I mean, I think there's a talent. I'm sure there's talents that are like that boost the ability to make camp, right? And if you make camp, there is a make camp roll, and if you make it, then you succeed and you find a good place, right? You're kind of scouting around. It's not infested by bugs. Nobody's going to come in this direction because you've got this, bluff or cliff face at your back. It's a good spot to make camp, right? The wind's coming in a particular direction. But if you fail, all that shit goes out the window because it's like you picked a bad spot. You didn't notice the bugs that were under the earth and they ate all your food. Or the wind comes in a particular direction. You can't light a fire. And when you can't light a fire, you can't cook the food and blah, 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 blah. Or you can't stay warm. So now you're cold and now everybody has the cold condition. Well, if you have cold condition, well, that's going to take, every time you do something, it's going to take a die away because you're cold and freezing and your strength is one less. So the short answer is, can you use the Genesis system to run a Forbidden Lands game? And the thing is, I would pose to you is, could you run a survival-based fantasy game using Genesis? If you think you can, and it incorporates the drawbacks that come with, well, I got to survive, then yes, you can. I wouldn't match them up 1 for 1 because I think it's just, can you run a survival zombie game in Star Wars? Sure, probably. But I usually don't equate zombies with Star Wars, right? Michael Holland, morning. Hey, morning, sunshine. Hey, glad you could join us. Glad you could join us. Yeah, where was I? I'm catching them in the chat. People have picked it up from there. WODU stuff, Wodu stuff, and now a bunch of OSR stuff. Reference it that way. Okay. Larry, off to do some research. See you, Larry. Have a good one. Good to see you. Harrigan's looking at the die type to find the die of fate. Victor, die of fate is from Burning Wheel. Ah, there you go. Mystery solved. Well done, Mr. Wyatt. Elementary, my dear Wyatt. Dorigo, had to go nerd out. I was wrong. 1E PHP, 134,000 words. 5th edition PHP, 213,000. Look at that. Thanks. Michael, you can, but I think you will have missed part of the core experience that is Forbidden Lands. I agree. I think there'll be a sliver of something that's just not there. Jim. Yeah, he's talking to Harrigan. Okay. Harrigan says there are plenty of talents that help, but don't neutralize the environmental risk in Forbidden Lands. There you go. And this goes to my example. Like, I don't know all the talents. These guys probably know more about the talents because they're searching through that. Like, I want to do this, right? Like, I'm not doing that as a game master. So these guys know the talents better than I do. Wayne says, agreed. My new Pathfinder ability to allow me to rest while walking is the closest I can think of. So what Wayne is talking about is he is leading the way. His character is chosen to lead the way. And leading the way requires a survival check. Right? Survival check, I think. So Wayne's probably got the best. So he leads the way. And his goal is to just get through a hex the right path. oh, no, not through the briars. We got to go this way, right? So that's what that incorporates, and that's what his role is. ROLE. And if he fails, then he is like, oh no, we should go this way. Oh shit, it's the briars. Oops, sorry guys. Or, oh no, we got lost. And you spend more time in the hex. Or, oh no, there's a forest fire and like we're right in the middle of it. So those are some of the failures that he comes up with. And so what he's talking about is his Pathfinder ability to allow him to rest while walking allows him to not have to rest at night, right? So if somebody doesn't get a quarter of sleep out of 4 quarters, right? 4 quarters out of a quarter of a day, 1 quarter of a day, they have to rest, or they are tired. They become tired. Now with Wayne's character, he doesn't necessarily have to rest, or I'm sorry, he rests as he leads the way, which is crazy. So, he could probably stand watch, and do things and he could pick the quarter that he's journeying to rest. And so in Forbidden Lands, when you rest, you get things back, you recover. So Wayne's guy with the new talent Pathfinder, he finds peace and tranquility as he's leading the way through the hex. And in so doing, he regains some of the things that he lost the prior quarters or day, the same day, earlier in the day. AWOL, good to see you. It would just be a hex crawl. All things are a hex crawl. AWOL's a fan of the hex crawl. But he does make a good point. Going back to Ty, and hey, do you think Genesis could pull off Forbidden Lands? Yeah, it ended up being that hex crawl component, but you got to incorporate those resource pieces and survival things. Like what are things that make it a survival fantasy game? If that's not incorporated, then it doesn't matter what you port it to. It doesn't have those. Wayne says that just allows me to recover from the latest river crossing. Yeah. Arrogant, side conversation. Ignore this. I will. Dorigo, my RPG daydream is to run a game using Forbidden Lands, but set it in the border princes of Warhammer Fantasy. I will take your word for it, for I am unfamiliar with the Warhammer world. But just make it survival, like dangerous, mishaps. I mean, for those that haven't played Forbidden Lands but have heard me talk about it ad nauseum, there's tables that are involved where it's like, oh, mishap, roll on that table. They enter in hex, roll on this table. Do they run into anything? So it's got all that stuff built into it. You can play other games that are exactly like that and incorporate it. Like AWOL doesn't play Forbidden Lands, but he has his own hex crawl, and he's got survival components to it, and a whole kind of system that he handles himself. When I think he's running DCC, right? AWOL. And the setting, it's just got to be survival based. So like a lot of people have run the Dark of Hot Springs Island, because you're on an island and, time to survive the island in every hex, and it's a hex crawl. Wayne says, FYI, I still need to sleep or get sleepy, but the PC can rest and recover ability damage on the move. Yes, that's how succinct of you. Thank you, Wayne. That's what I was trying to convey. So yeah. Yeah. There you go. I got a thing I can bring up. What time is it? I got a little time, maybe, until like doggy dog wakes up, right? What was I going to say? There's Matt Colville for you. This one I saw. This is interesting. DM David blog. I don't know if you guys follow him on Twitter. I thought that was kind of interesting because I think he's, he probably knows some of the answers to this. I think he just puts it out, to get some dialogue going. And he says the PCs are in a village stocked with the usual cast of NPCs working the inn, the shops, the church, and so on. How do you encourage the players to interact? Like a simple question. And you'd think like, hey, they're in a town. They have these things. Like they have access to this stuff. How do you get them to interact? Mm-hmm. And there's no real wrong answer, I don't think necessarily. I think there's some good ideas that could come out of this. I didn't read a lot of the responses necessarily. Here's one that says, I usually have an NPC roughed out for each major structure they'll visit in the village. Town master's hall, taverns, apothecary, trading post, but I also keep a card of NPC names and races in case I need to quickly improv someone. Okay, not really going to how to get them to interact, but when they do, here's this guy's answer. We order you to have fun when the DM says to role play among yourselves and no one does. That's a funny meme. No, this is, again, stupid link. How do I get to this? The replies to this specifically. I asked, why are they there? This is, what is going on here? I never pull up the right thing. So weird. I don't know. I'm doing Twitter wrong. Regardless. How do you get them to interact? You'd always get the person in distress. Oh my God, my boy, my girl, they're stuck in the well. Players, who cares? I don't want to deal with that. Do they have money? They don't have money. Do they need money? What's the motivations? What's the character's motivation? What's my motivation? Post up signs. A mistaken identity. Somebody thinks they're somebody else. They're out to kill them. Got a bounty on their head. There's a way to interact. Why would anybody go to a town? And the shops, the church, and so on. Cleric. Most of the clerics I've ever had, if we go into a town, they're always typically, like I go to the local church. Is there a church of St. Cuthbert? Are they sent to the town or they just come across it? They got wares to get rid of? Nobody answered my response. Maybe he didn't have any replies. I don't know. I thought he had some replies, but I guess he didn't really. AWOL says, to get them enticed to shop, I use their senses, intriguing sights, sounds, smells. The shops need depth. Things they need, things they'll trade and craft, not just a shopping list of upgrades. Yeah. It's not the shopping, right? Let's go shopping. Ask them questions. Give them some agency in the story. Who do you care about in the village? Yeah, is there a contact that they know? And then that contact is somewhere else or somebody else is with them. So, yes, my sister lives here. Great. Your sister can be found. You know where she lives, but she's not there. You also know that she, works for the blacksmith. Oh, let's go to the blacksmith. There's your sister. And then the blacksmith. And she introduces you. This is my boss. Iron Hammer, the blacksmith. Great. Yeah. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, hey, nice weapons you got there. Oh, yeah, we could get rid of these. I don't want them. Or, hey, could you repair them? Blah, 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 blah. Why not go to a town? No, I don't know. The PCs are in a village. So he's got them in the village for some reason. It's got Hamlet on there, so I don't know if he's starting them out at Hamlet. There's so much. Twitter, I don't know. Can you give me more info? Right? Like, they're in this village stocked with the usual cast of NPCs working on how to get the players to interact. And this is sandbox stuff, right? This is some of the issues that people have with sandboxes. I run a sandbox game. Holy shit. How do you get your players to do anything? Right? Maybe it's not even the town. If you're running sandbox, how do you get them to interact? Well, you got to give them info. I guess they got to have a reason to go there. AWOL brings up a good point. Smells. Like, oh man, you go by this place and you just smell the bread and like cooking spices and then like a waft of barbecue. Like, I go outside of my house. I got a neighbor over here. He does like smokes meats and stuff, I think. And like be the middle of December and 10 degrees out. And I just get this huge smell of something cooking. I'm like, my dog, I'm like, oh, you want to stay out here, don't you? Who or what has been giving them problems lately? Describe the body and the gibbet outside in the village. Old school shopping takes forever at first, but sometimes balancing necessity versus weight can be a fun challenge when gearing up for the third delve into that damn mushroom cave. Yeah, where are they going to go? Like, are they going to go somewhere? They're going to probably need some stuff. Yeah. You probably need, you're going to go into you guys got torches? Got a lantern? 10-foot pole? Marbles? Chalk? Bag of flour? Can we get all that stuff? Yes, you have all it. Yes, yeah. You put it on your sheet. Kasha, whatever, it's in the PHP. Okay. Sweet. But as you're doing that, this comes up. You're running this person. Describe the person in the stocks. How do you know them and why are you not surprised they are there? Yeah, that's a good one, Wayne. Wayne, you're so good. So are you, AWOL. So good. Yeah, have a hanging or something, right? Somebody broke the law or something and you might know them. They're the gallows. Somebody flies out of a bar, out of an inn, Western style, and they fall at your feet. and then the guys come out, think that you're with them. Hey, arrest that guy we just threw out of there and arrest his buddies too. Hey man, I don't even know this asshole. In a sandbox, you screw your party over just enough to drive them to seek a solution. That need is what creates amazing drama in of itself. Screw over as in consuming resources and getting battered on their journeys. Yeah, some of us, sandbox is pretty straightforward, easy, no problem. I don't know, man. I find some of the players, not all, that I would play with, they need guidance. They need things dangled in front of them, like smacking them in the face, right? A motivation. I mean, let's face it. D&D or a fantasy RPG with no, why is somebody adventuring in this world, man? I'm in the village. I'm good. I'm going to set up shop. This is where I'm going to stay. That's where I'm going to live. Makes a pretty damn boring game. That third trip in is the one where everyone realizes they should all be using crossbows. Kill it before it can get to you. Now, what else did I have up here? Is that all I had? Oh, let me see. Oh, this is another interesting one. This one was... I don't know. Kind of bookmark this to see what people would think. The 8 most important DM traits. Mileage may vary. 3wisedms.com by Tony. I think I saw this on the web or a link to it, and I just marked it, put it in my Instapaper. Pretty easy to manage this stuff. What defines a DM who is truly great at the craft they practice? Some would argue that it's masterful comprehension of the rules and their applications, while others might say it's the experience they possess from years of running successful campaigns. This is why we have assembled a list of 8 essential DM qualities to help ensure your next game starts off with a bang, or the one you've currently running is filled with high player energy and memorable moments. Establish clear communication. While this seems like a no-brainer, confusion surrounding plot points can happen to even the most seasoned DMs. This will lead to difficulty getting the players to buy into your story when some of them aren't sure why or what they are actually doing. Just try to keep your plot points simple enough that you can recap them without giving a 25-minute presentation with handouts. Yeah, some of the lore, some of the legends in Forbidden Lands can get a little lengthy. I heard my cat again. Having cat issues today. Thought they could get a little lengthy. Say handouts are fine, but they could still kind of get too long. You know, sometimes it just needs to be succinct and to the point. Bad guy over the mountain, enslaving, taking kids prisoner, whatever, child labor. We need that to stop. Beasties coming out of the woods, not sure. There's an uptick, kills all our cattle. We need that because food. Go take care of it. Okay. So what are you supposed to do? Go take care of it. Got it. Complacency is the momentum killer in a sandbox. Yeah, man. They always need something. Quest item, resources, people, secrets, places. Yeah, man. Says AWOL. Nuba says, my table has been completely clueless on Hot Springs Island for 9 sessions, so survival and curiosity were the driving factors so far. It worked, but it took them some time for everything to click. Rum. K-Rice, good to see you. Rum makes DMing better. I like the cut of your jib, Rise. What else? Next one, be open-minded. Yeah. Some of these are pretty straightforward, right? Pretty elementary. Elementary, my dear Watson. The value of this is not to be undersold, as it applies to everything from character concepts to player agency. But it's their game too, so no matter how ridiculous their idea may seem, they can always try. Not sure I agree with that. Saw a meme the other day about somebody wearing leather armor. What was it? Speak with dead or revivify? If you cast revivify on a leather armor, would you would you turn that leather armor back into a cow and then smother the thing that's wearing it? Somebody said, I think in the Discord said, they had a player actually say that, ask that. I'm open-minded. I will hear you. That's it. Open to feedback. Yeah, this is a big one. It's tough. Got to take some constructive criticism. People need to know how to convey constructive criticism too, right? If you're an experienced DM, it's easy to dismiss player feedback. These guys don't know what they're talking about. If they want more of something or dislike some aspect of your game, it should be taken seriously. These could be warning signs that you're about to lose a player. That's stars and wishes right there, my Freund. My Freund. Know thy audience. Before you break out that joke that isn't suitable for even most cable channels, you may want to look around and make sure that no one's kids or grandparents are listening. Yeah? You should do the same before you roll out a heroic game about saving a kingdom to a room full of players who'd pride themselves on not caring about anything aside from getting paid. Yeah. A lot of this stuff is cats too, right? If you use cats or some type of session zero kind of outline. So get a good read on the room between games and it will make everyone's game life easier. Be extra. What? Extra? What's that? What do you mean? I don't know what he's talking about. The pivotal moments of the game, these scenes deserve special amount of description when telling the story. Likewise, when the paladin pulls the master sword from the stone, it should be something extraordinary in terms of your campaign. While some feel very strongly against homebrewing items, it opens up a great number of doors, especially in terms of flavor. If you're uncomfortable going too far off the rails with this, just combine two existing items. Trust me, no paladin in the history of gaming ever complained about getting a flaming sword of sharpness. Be extra? Yeah, okay. I think I get what they're getting at here. Raised dead on leather armor. Instant cow. Yeah, man. Manage that game flow. How this should operate largely depends on how often your group meets. Meeting frequently, might be struggling to provide enough materials. It could be a relief when the party wants to go item shopping. Hey-o. Either way, your players should feel like they accomplished a decent amount by the end of each game. Who was it that was saying that? Was it Hickman? Was it the Hickman things? The points Hickman came up with Tracy and then he corrected it and said it was Laura. Like at the end, I think it was that video and Tracy Hickman, where it's like at the end of every session, you should have accomplished something and felt the accomplishment at the end. Every game, I don't remember. Shit. Anyways, regardless. Game flow. Okay. Game flow. Control the flow of lore. Lore tolerance is something that can make or break the game in terms of its environment. Some players might want to hear a 5-minute history of the castle they just spent an entire game traveling to, while others may just want to walk the hell in. Yeah. Lore. Book o' lore. Here's the Cliff's Notes. If you'd like to know more, visit us at wikipedia.ravenloft.com to know all the rooms and history of Castle Ravenloft. Remember that unpredictability is the spice of the game. Keep your players on the toes with unexpected events. Not what you want them to be trapped in a perpetual gotcha moment. Rather how the group has things planned, just like in real life, shouldn't always be how they turn out. I don't think that's a problem in most RPGs. Maybe, I don't know. Oh, that's too funny. Final thoughts. That was the 8, huh? Yeah. I guess. And, pretty good. Probably would refine them a little bit somehow. Being a DM and running a campaign is a lot like making a machine. If only some parts are extremely well made, they won't keep it from failing somewhere else. And while there is nothing that can guarantee your game won't have some rocky points, you can at least set yourself up for success. Listen to your players Let them contribute to the story. And yep, because most people never express their unhappiness until it's too late. And to be fair, your group probably has a great deal of creativity within it. Use that to strengthen both the fabric of your game and seal it with the buy-in the players will undoubtedly have for the work you have collectively produced. Yeah. There's always the, hey, I don't know what to do because I want to go, like, I'm doing this, and the players aren't going in that direction. They don't have interest. Like, how do I do this? I think that some of these pickles come in with the game master having a set of preconceived notions in their brain on how they want to do, like, what's going to be in front of the players. Give them a problem, allow them to come up with a solution. Oh, excuse me. I had a late night last night. I don't see any faces in the chat that were up as late as I was. Mr. Laramie Wall was on a tear. Oh, raised dead, leather armor. Intimidating for sure. You're right about finding stuff. Hot Springs Island is filled with all sorts of weirdness, which keeps it interesting, but a bit confusing as well. K-Rise says, I always ask for feedback via text the next day. That way they can't see the single tear roll down my face. Like the classic littering commercial. You could just like throw your phone across the room, cuss, stomp out your door, go for a walk to cool off. Rage. Like just take your desk and just shove everything off of it. They don't know what they're talking about. No home brewing items. Let's sit in the corner over here. If you squint a bit and tilt your head, there's a list of tips for running a meeting. Terrible, terrible meeting. Most meetings are terrible. Let's talk about meetings now that we're on that topic. Now I am imagining a weekly board room meeting of the local dungeon monsters. I wish I had a gavel. Right, I would like to move to convene the weekly meeting of the local Dungeon Masters Guild, or in this case, Dungeon Monsters. Victor Wyatt, the monster meeting might make for the beginning of a cool RPG session. All right, I will leave you guys to your brainstorming session. Oh, man. Yeah, Jim. I left the Discord last night at about, I think it was midnight. Was it midnight? It was midnight or later. Maybe 1? I don't remember. Farty joined. I think when I left, it was Farty, AWOL, Laramie. Was there a fourth person? Me? I think that was it, right? Kobolds again. You bit here busy and through that door. You in the door, and there's a boardroom with monsters in suits discussing the merits of making dungeon environments safer. We need to decrease the time spent on fighting adventurers. We have to optimize our operations. That's a YouTube video. If you had a lot of makeup people that could dress up in really realistic, pseudo anthropomorphic monsters in a board meeting, or talking about, like, we always talk about the adventuring party, right? What about the monsters? right? They're living in their place, minding their own business, you know. Nature's law in effect, survival of the fittest. There's a food chain. Along comes these asshole people into our lair. I just want to protect my place. Yeah. All right, now everyone gather your coins and put them in chests at the foot of your beds. How are we adapting to the new warlock avocations? I had a rash of people come through with magic users and wizards. You know, we lost a few. Couldn't make the saves appropriately, and, well, Rustmaster has been starving for a little while, and, well, how do we mitigate adventurer risk? Oh man, this is going somewhere, right? Thanks, guys. The ghouls are filing a grievance against the gelatinous cube on level 3 that's dissolving all the corpses. You know what this is? It's like become the human resources department of a dungeon. Management leadership or HR of a dungeon. Who left the door to the dungeon open? Everybody looks around. I could have swore they smashed it. I'm pretty sure I heard it smashed. Was there evidence of it being smashed? Because I know I didn't leave it open. I'm pretty sure I locked it. Does it have a lock? I don't even know. Did we have a lock on it? How did they even find it? I thought it was like, didn't we like cover it with a bunch of bushes or something? I thought we burned the map. The only map finding this place. Yeah, about that. About those adventurers. Yeah. We got a rogue employee that keeps going to town and, you know, eating their livestock, and so we're getting a little bit of fallout from that. Well, have we thought of putting like some of the remains of their stuff outside the dungeon and not keeping it in here? Maybe if we just put it at the door or the steps that, you know, they don't come further down. Maybe an idea, maybe to kind of get them not to come down here further. Like, could we just give them some of that stuff? It seems like that's what they're looking for. Or I don't know. HR dungeon game, Kickstarter. Somebody will make it. Somebody can make it. Oh, man. Too funny. Maybe the meeting is about the profits and losses of their last dungeon build. Well, we need a board. We need a board of directors, right? Who... Somebody needs to do something about the green slime in the pantry. We lost half our kobold work crew last week. Oh, God, for sure. Twitter account K-Rise. Wood back 100%. Do we need to change the lock on that dungeon door again? Someone keeps breaking it. Well, it's like a communism, right? Like you have, or the what is it? The company farm, right? Like you got the corporate side and then you got the residents, right? Like it's a town, maybe in its of itself, kind of a combination. I don't know. Earnings report. I'm afraid to say that we are down year over year by 10%. We had adventurers come in, but they seem pretty low level. It didn't possess a lot, so we couldn't, we got some fresh meat, small parties. It sounds like they're coming in, and we used to get funnels through here where like we could get 6 to 9 individuals, but we got a rake, a hoe, and a rolling pin, and no armor. So yeah, it wasn't very, very fruitful month or fruitful quarter. We could definitely do better. Not sure how to attract more adventurers, but do we want to attract adventurers? What are we in the business for? What is our business model here? What are we trying to achieve? I think if we just circle back and get back to basics, right? What are we good at? How do we define those target goals? And, by all means, we are way, way over on expenses. This quarter, it was out of control. We need to get those under control. And the only way to do that is, maybe make some cuts. But then, how do we determine that? Well, we get adventurers in here, maybe sort that all out. It's been requested that the ogres try to be quieter when working out in the gym. There's no need to yell after every rep, fellas. It's Planet Fitness. Can't grunt. You can't grunt when you lift weights. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Oh, man. Too funny. Guys, we need to clean up the mess on level 2. Orcus is coming for an inspection next week. Oh, dog and pony shows would be classic. An inspection. It's the holiday season. Our holidays or theirs? It's theirs. Oh, okay. All right. So a lot of people home from the adventuring. Yeah. We should probably do a raid. We haven't done a raid in a long time. We could try that. Maybe offering raid services. Probably, I mean, there's how many villages? Well, we got a few that are too far out there. Could we tunnel there? Could we extend the dungeon? Maybe, expand our operations into those villages, maybe to get closer, and then we can run an operations out of that region. Might make things more affordable. Being cost conscious, cut expenses. If we put in a far west branch of the dungeon next to, I believe they call it Hamlet. It's got some probably pretty decent potential. It's a growing village at the moment, but we probably want to keep that growth under control. Guys, we need to clean up. Yeah, the gelatinous cubes want to unionize again. Yeah, there's the black pudding, right? The black pudding and the ochre jelly. Strange relationship going on there. I'm not sure that's right for this workplace. I think that's a little fraternizing. And we should probably pull them in for a meeting and sit down with them and hash that out. Do some one-on-one coaching. Because we definitely don't want those two together. There are some power shifts in the outer planes that are affecting relations with our abyssal partners. Oh, fantastic. Might need to renegotiate the terms of our contracts. Yeah, do we have that portal? Do we still have access to that portal? Is that portal still available? No, portal's down. Portal's down again. Well, shit, how are those guys going to get in here, right? Need some extra planers. Oh, Celestials? No, 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 no. We don't need. Hey, we don't need those guys. No, no, no. We don't need those guys. Keep those guys out of here. Don't need those guys. Keep them out of here. Well, we run the risk. We run a portal. Last time we opened a portal, introduced a little bit of a risk with Celestials coming through there. It's budget time for allocating consumable magic items again. Remember that if you don't use them, then you won't get as many next quarter. Don't hoard them. That's just asking for adventurers. Where was this for, starting at 9 o'clock Central Time? You approach the cave entrance. There appears to be a number of creatures holding signs and chanting, be fair to those who scare. The denizens are on strike. Don't cross the line. What the hell's going on over there? I think the monsters are on strike. Oh. Should we go in there? I don't feel right about doing that. It wouldn't be right. Well, yeah, but what do we care? I mean, I could just become a zombie, right? And then, it looks like they need help. I mean, oh, you're going to become a scab? That's not cool. I mean, come on. These guys are trying to, strengthen numbers. They're probably being oppressed. Mind flayer. A mind flayer is probably, shitty work conditions, a tyrant. I've heard things. I've seen things come back from other adventurers about the mind flayer just making it really rough on these inhabitants. Yeah, I don't know. But he's probably paying good. And he could be a zombie. You don't have to eat. Like, you just kind of exist. We could kill other people. Maybe we need to take sides with these guys. Besides, they may have a point, right? I mean, who are we to kill them? Like, I don't know. There may be something we can work out here. Is it worth holding a second anniversary event? That first anniversary cost us the lives of some of our most valuable employees. The Antiugs are asking for another space planning study and also request that we make Mexican food off the menu at the cafeteria. No Taco Tuesday. So HR has advised we do not hire Incubus and Succubus for the Hallows Eve party this year. Too funny. The goblins have requested that the Sturgies please go outside to feed. They're making a mess. The Anti-Ugs are anti-goblin because of that. The Anti-Ugs want to, they're okay with the Sturgy mess. Oh man, that's too funny. There is a role-playing game where you play the monsters though, isn't there? What's our sales team look like? Like, they're outside and getting a feel for adventurers, right? Shouldn't they be intercepting some of these before they get into our dungeon? Yeah. There's been a big uptick in elven presence in the forest. I'm not sure what that is. They haven't gone to the... What is it? The realms? They haven't moved on. They've been here for hundreds of years. What's taking them so long? The wizard who's been causing trouble on level 5 has signed a no aggression pact and applied for residency. We extend our welcome and ask you to please call him Mr. Necromancer from now on. The vampire hates the taste of your blood and is pissed off because you've been killing too many adventurers. He's asked that you please give him a free ride to his lair, but not to the crypt. Like, he said that this is a restricted zone. He says, like, level 3. His lair is restricted, but he wants adventurers to get in at least to level 2, so that is a chance to meet him, meet and greet him. Monthly meet and greet with adventurers. So don't kill them, okay? Or if you do, only kill half and then keep the other half as for a meet and greet with the vampire on level 2. Again, not to extend that past level 2. Wandering Monster High School. That's the truth of D&D. You are the monsters. Displacer beasts keep waffling on negotiations along with blink dogs. Speaking of which, the forest, the Trents and twig blights are up in arms. Oh man, wicked for the dungeon. Skeletons not played for laughs. Oh, that's too funny. That's good stuff, man. Good stuff. What am I doing here? Ush. Well, it's been a while, and I know my dogs are, if they're not up yet, their teeth are going to be floating, and then I'm probably going to head off to the vet, unfortunately, on a Saturday, which is great. We'll see. But thanks for showing up, keeping me company, entertaining me. I appreciate it. It's good stuff. Good to see everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. Be careful. Be safe out there. Do some good gaming. Hope it's a great weekend. And Gaming MBS is recording Monday night on the Gaming MBS YouTube channel. We're going to be talking about something. I can't remember the topic, but I'll look it up. So if you are so inclined to watch us record live, great. If not, you can catch the podcast later. Yeah, I think that's it. BSRCon, 28th to the 30th. A little less than 50 events. Pretty much all booked. All booked, except for some of the talks. Like, I think we have one, the Hexflower talk by Goblin's Henchman. It's got plenty of places. Got the Paint Tank that are pretty much open. There's a talk on how to run a Swords and Sorcery game. Yeah, Swords and Wizardry. I don't remember if it's specifically for the game or just specifically for the genre. But, yeah, if you're going, great. Hope to see you. Thanks for registering. Thanks for signing up. We're going to donate the proceeds to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society charity. After we cover like some costs with tabletop events and anything else we need to buy, which is pretty minimal. Yeah, it's been an okay experience. Like, yeah, a couple hiccups, but overall went fairly well. I've been throwing some ideas around for the next one, whether it be in 6 months or another year. And can't complain. So I would say if you're signed up for Gaming BSRCon, great. If you're not, then there's talks of maybe people throwing down some pickup games at the last minute. I just don't want. I may be considering closing badge registration because I don't want more people to register with badges and then go, hey, I can't get in any events because there's none available. So it'll be real nice. It'll be a nice, quaint little weekend worth of playing games. So other than that, I will leave you. Thank you for the wishes on the cat situation. Eesh. Pets, kids, not to compare the two, but people have kids and they have family. You guys, hopefully they're all well and nothing's wrong. So we'll see. But have a great weekend. And of course, be a positive force in the tabletop RPG hobby. Thanks, everyone. See you later.